One would see anything and they would be completely safe. An entire week had passed before Kira had brought practicing up with Luke again, and since her parents had left for church without her this morning, she had called Luke right away. Things were still awkward at home when her parents were around, but when she was alone, left with nothing but her thoughts, home was excruciating. Now, Kira wondered which was the lesser of two evils. Come on, one more time and then we can take a break. Kira sighed and refocused her energy on the boulder Luke stood next to. He told her it wouldn't actually bums that vampires were the only things affected by the light, but she was a little afraid of hurting him if she couldn't rein it in once started. Kira, he brought her back to attention. Just focus, he had said, it'll come to you naturally. Well, Kira stared at the rock thinking, light on fire, please God give me a little flame, but nothing. Her palms didn't even feel warm. She threw them up in the air. This is just never happening. I can't keep staring at a rock and pointing my hands in front of me. I might as well say abracadabra and try to make your house float away. This is ridiculous. Luke shook his head. Let's take a break, I need to think of something. I don't know why this is so hard for you. Ilman, we were all young, the power felt like using another limb, it was always easier than this. And I know you're strong. Seen it. Well, good for you. Kira huffed and collapsed on the grass where she was standing. He walked inside his house, clutching his forehead with one hand, clearly trying to make a better lesson plan than the one they were currently following. He's as new at this as I am. Kira thought. She let her back fall flat against the grass so she could stare up at the blue, cloudless sky. Come on, she thought, dear son, please give me the power to channel your rays through my thereby allowing me to inherit my apparent birthright and kill some vampires __love, Kira. I've officially gone insane, she while rolling over onto her side to stare at the few brown leaves dusting the ground. Autumn is a lot different in the south, a little too green for her liking. Kira wondered what it would be like to have a Christmas without snow. She would miss the New York blizzards, the slushy streets and the cursing pedestrians slipping down the subway steps or marching Prada through inches of snow. Rockefeller lit up at Christmas. The city came alive when the lights on the gigantic tree were switched on, and the ice skating rink was crowded at every hour of the day. She had always come home for a week during Christmas break, to visit with her family, but hanging ornaments on a plastic tree never felt right. Kira used to love coming home to her dorm where her roommate Sarah and her owl decorate a blue spruce pine tree. But, Kira sighed as she sat up, she had more pressing concerns. Luke said it would be easy, like breathing, eventually. She wondered if maybe it was just too late. She took psychology back at boarding and she remembered learning about human development. The first few stages of life are the most important. If you don't learn to speak by the time you're 4, you probably never will. Babies are bomb curious and learn far more than adults do. Maybe she had just missed out on her chance. Enough ruminating, Kira mentally shook herself. She needed to learn this. Luke finally re-emerged from his home and carried over 2 lemonades. Kira gladly accepted. The mix of cold and sweet instantly her, and she turned to Luke, waiting to hear his thoughts. So. Basically, you're a freak. Hey. He threw his hands up in defense. Kidding. I just don't think the way I was taught as a boy is going to do anything for you. Your body chrsnt react, doesn't know its own. We need to awaken you first. Okay, creepy much. I just mean, we need to find some sort of trigger so you can start to remind your body how it's supposed to work. Well, how did you learn? Maybe if you tell me a little bit about the procedure, I'll understand. Luke sat down next to her on the grass, sipping his lemonade and staring deep into the ebony woods. It's hard to explain, I guess. Try. She said, not letting him off the hook at all. This was all his idea anyway. Well, not technically, but still. Ivhen you're little, the teaching is less about learning how to bring the fire out and more about learning how to stop it and control it. Ever since I can remember, I'd think of the fire and it would come. Easy as pie. The hard part is controlling it. So, it'll be doubly difficult for me. She ran a hand through her hair, exasperated. Fantastic. One of the main reasons conduit communities live in such is to protect the children who have no control. The fire doesn't hurt humans or even inanimate objects, only vampires. So, theoretically, it would safe to live anywhere. But babies just release energy all the time without any warning, and suddenly there's a streak of fire soaring through the air like a cannonball until an adult catches it and sucks it back into themselves. Obviously, if we lived in human communities, I'd stand to catch on to the strangeness. Will I ever be allowed to see that? Kira asked, vulnerable. She wished she could have grown up in such a place, totally accepted by everyone. I hope so. Sunnyville was like nothing you've ever seen. I miss it sometimes. Do you come here, Luke? Do you take on this mission? Kira had wondered it for a while. Who would willingly enroll in high school to basically babysit the one person who could destroy the world? Nobody invented that kind of pressure. Because it was my duty. That can't be the only reason. You're not one to blindly follow orders. Remember a protector in New York, and he was nothing like you. Had he said duty, I would have believed him, but you don't like to always follow the rules, you mean Sai. I spoke with him before coming here. He told me how little you knew, how you would kneel someone to look out for you. He did care about you, in his 01VN extremely stuffer way. And you pitied me. A little. Luke shrugged. He was trying to be completely honest with her. A lot of it was the fact that this was such an important duty, and important missions are hardly ever granted to someone as young as me. Pan of it was my competition. One other boy in my TOUTL, Nick, fit the bill, but he was a hard ass and no fam. I knew he'd never befriend you unless necessary. I knew he wouldn't provide the a girl your situation would need. And, you know me, he broke his far-off stare to smile at her, I can't resist a damsel in distress. He lowered his voice to spooky imitation of Dracula. Now, TTY to light me on fire if you dare, mwahahaha. Kira stood, ignoring Luke's impression of an evil mastermind, and got right back down to business. So, IA trigger. Yup. Any idea what kind? Luke his head with a sly smile. He waved her closer and she hesitantly walked over while he tummed around. She moved closer to his back, wondering what the heck was going on, when he turned around and lunged at her. Luke grabbed her by the throat, knocking her to the ground, and she saw teeth protruding past his lips. He sunk his head closer, so the teeth started to poke her, and Kira felt trapped. Hell, she couldn't move under the weight of his body and had no weapon to fight him off. Desperation heated her veins and she felt the flood of warmth surge through her body. She started shivering from the temperature difference between her molten core and the breeze brushing her skin. Kira willed the fire to seep out, anything to stop the unbearable scorching off her heart. Suddenly, she burst, the same way she had in the auditorium. She felt the bum on her hand and opened her eyes despite the pain. Luke smiled and the waves of sun rocked past him, leaving him unharmed. Kira felt like a river that had just been set free from a dam. There was no way to stop the waves of power bursting forth. Control it! Luke yelled over the cackling fire. Kira told it to stop. The started slowly calming and she curved her fingers towards her palm, trapping the light in her vice-like grip. Finally, the last bit of light burned out and Kira almost expected smoke to seep from her palms. Instead, Luke trapped her in a hug and swung her around. That was incredible. I was even pushed back a little from your power, which is really hard to do, TMST me. You're really strong. You don't even know how strong. It's like there's no limit to how much light you can channel. I never felt it waver until you wanted it to. People usually only last for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe less at full force. Kira swiveled _ how long was I going for? Like half an hour. It was incredible _ oh my god. Kira sat down. That felt like 30 seconds to me. It's okay, the timing will come with the control. But, for now at least, we know your trigger. She looked up at him expectantly. Well, duh. No offense, but clearly being scared is the only thing that brings the power out in you. We'll fix it. Don't worry. How? She looked up at him, noticing how the sun silhouetted his features, almost looked like he wore a golden crow _ I mean, I can't always run around jumping on you with fake fangs. That was just a one-time deal. You're okay, right? I got a little into the moment his eyes peered towards her throat. Kira reached her hand to her. She felt completely fine. There was no bruise even though it felt like he had choked her pretty bad. Is it possible that channeling also acts as a cure? Not that I've ever heard of. He was intrigued. She could tell I never mentioned this before, but in the auditorium, I was hit with a brick and my leg was bleeding really badly and Diana cut my face. But afterwards, when I came back to your place, all the cuts had closed. They seemed to have disappeared. I just assumed it was another side effect, like the burns. Luke grabbed her shoulders, staring her down. Are you sane? She nodded. Don't tell anyone. I don't know what it means, but it is most definitely not normal. I promise, I won't tell. I don't even have anyone to tell. She shook free of his hold and tried to laugh it off. Just another way she was different, dangerous. Kira sighed. So what now? How do we keep practicing? Try to think of things that scare you, and see if anything happens. Like what? Spiders? Maybe? I don't know. This is new to me. Just try to make yourself scare to death. Kira rolled her eyes. She just had to scare the life out of herself, how simple. Kira tried thinking of spiders, but nothing happened. She thought of their hairy legs, the clicking of sharp mucus-covered fangs and sticky webs trapping her alive. Nothing. Next she thought of flying, picturing turbulence so rough her butt picked up off the seat and the overhead compartments fell open. She pictured oxygen masks falling from the ceiling, the plane spin me circles in the air to eventually crash in the Pacific Ocean where she would drown in the cockpit or escape to eaten alive by great white sharks. Not even a flush on her skin. Finally Kira thought of the worst thing, a scene out of Scream where a knife-waving psycho chased her through her house killing off her friends and popping out of closets. Nada. All Kira had managed to do was give herself the heebie-jeebies since her and Luke were totally alone in the middle of nowhere, a place no one could hear her scream. Kira shivered. This isn't working. I'm just freaking myself out. Keep trying. This has to work _ it's the only way you'll learn any control and be able to do anything aside from fending off a vamp right when it's about to bite you. That meth KX1 is way risky. Suddenly, Kira had an idea. She looked back at the rock, focusing on the lines of color formed by sunlight and shadow _ towards the bottom. The hard surface turned black and she stared into the abyss, letting her eyes lose fuse and stand to blur, until an image from her subconscious over Diana. Kira imagined the moment when Diana leaned in to sink her teeth into Kira's flesh, the uncontrollable fear she had felt as death crept closer _ how she looked at Tristan and in that moment realized he could do nothing to save her. That each of them was helpless. Kira waited for the pinprick of teeth on her, felt the tiniest pinch before. _ and then Kira felt it, her strength was gathering, heat flowed to her palm, and, for the first time, it felt as though she called it. She pulled at the tendrils of fire with her mind, willing them to surge through her veins, accepting the pain and on the darkness she was trying to dissipate. Kira felt a burn as the flares broke through the skin of her palm and Luke's backyard. She lost whatever hold she had had for those few seconds and started sweating under the relentless surge. Distantly, she heard a man's voice calling at her, telling her to stop, telling her to rein it in, but some son of monster had awoken inside of Kira. Like an out-of-body experience, she felt her legs give out, felt the grass cmnch against her cheek, all the while her hands aimed out towards the rook. New hands lifted her, surrounded her. Kira felt her palms press against something hard, felt the light drain away and seep into a different source. Slowly, Kira's vision began to return. She focused on her slightly glowing fingernails where they pressed up against soft cotton. Strings of light danced between her knuckles, trying to escape the suction cup hold of her hands against Luke's chest. Kira noticed for the first time that the light was sinking into him, weaving into his chest and leaving her body. Kira, you have to stop. It's much. She looked at him, at the strain on his face and the rough lines of his taut lips. Not her smiling Luke. This Luke was in pain. He squinted his eyes to squelch the feeling, trying to act like a man, but Kira could hear his raspy breath. She stepped back and folded her fingers into her palm, willing the torment to stop, and her light obeyed. I winked out almost immediately. Luke turned away and with a loud grunt, released the sunlight he had absorbed from Kira out towards the forest. For the first time, Kira understood how beautiful it was. The flames illuminated even the darkest corners of the forest, like a firework exploding at eye level. Red, yellow, orange and blue swirls circled Luke and the yard around, leaving everything unharmed. Flowers tumbled almost immediately to catch the new rays and blooms opened as if commanded. But then, Luke crashed to the ground and crumpled against the grass, letting his light wink out and leaving the yard shrouded in darkness once more. Luke! Kira screamed and ran over to him. She landed on her knees his immobile body and turned him over so his back touched the grass. She cupped his face in her hands. Luke, please, I didn't mean whatever happened. His eyes peeked out from nearly closed lids. His fingers moved against grass, inching closer to her own. Kira grabbed his hand and moved to rest his head upon her lap, brushing damp hair from his forehead. Luke! His eyes fluttered and Kira heard his breathing lengthen. Hi, he said quietly, squirming in his drowsiness. Give me a second, he asked and tried to sit up. Kira let him gather his thoughts and regain his composure, but she needed to know what had just happened. Did she almost kill him? Kira thought he had said it wasn't possible. I'm sorry, Kira said. He looked over at her and shook his head. What are you sorry for, Kira? It was my 01VN fault. What happened, Luke? I thought I couldn't hun you. You didn't. He sighed and tried to stand. Luke wobbled on his feet, but took a few hesitant steps, as though he were trying to remind his legs how to work. Kira followed him back to his porch and sat beside him on the stoop. I overexcited myself, Luke said finally. Kira looked at him, completely blank in the face. I tried to take your power into my body. You looked completely lost, like you were drowning, and then you fainted and I had no idea what to do. So, I let your light into me to calm the storm and I vac you up, but I guess it son of backfired. Luke looked sheepish. Some teacher he was. But, why did it huff you? It was just too much power. You have no idea how strong you are. Once you realized what I was doing, you kept pushing more and more light into me and I just got full, I guess. Like a water balloon that gets filled too much to release it. Kira nodded, finally understanding. She felt horrible. At least it worked. Kira tried to be optimistic, while she mindlessly pulled little grass strands from the ground. What did you think of? To trigger your power, I pictured Diana and the scene in the auditorium. Kira shuddered, not wanting to start up again. Luke just nodded. So, we're probably done. Train me for the day. You faint _ then I fainted. I'd call it a successful session, Luke said, making light of the situation like always. Kira nudged him her shoulder. Ivy hat, are you going to tell the council? I assume you have to send some sort of report this week, Luke shrugged. Not much. I'll let them know you inherited the power, that you have finally started learning to channel at evil, and that I'm training you. Nothing about the extent of your abilities. Luke away from her as he finished talking, trailing his words off into silence. Ivy hat, are you hiding? What would happen if they found out? I honestly don't know. But, it wouldn't be good. No, probably not. He agreed, almost silently, reminding Kira that this wasn't all fun and games. It was serious. Luke grabbed her hand, pulled her from the stoop and led her inside to his kitchen. Kira grabbed her backpack and noticed a small in the corner of the room. She couldn't remember ever seeing it before. Kira walked over, scanning the titles. Some were classic fiction. She spotted a copy of Dracula, a worn cover and binds that had started to disintegrate. Vampire novels, even current girly romances, were all stacked in perfect alphabetical order _ and then, on the lower shelf, Kira saw a book on condits, on their history and culture. The binding was old, filmed with a perpetual dust, and gold script displayed the title but no author _ Kira heard Luke in the kitchen. It sounded as though the refrigerator had just closed and, before she realized what she was doing, Kira grabbed the book and stuffed it in her bag. Ready? Luke said as he rounded the corner with a water which he threw in her direction. Kira caught it and followed him out to the car. When Kira got home, she ran up to her room, ignoring the family dinner set up in the dining room. She dropped her book bag, locked the to her bedroom and pulled out the text she had stolen from Luke. Kira turned off her lights, leaving only the reading lamp by her bed on, and situated herself in her comforter _ She looked at the index, Chapter 1 A Brief History, Chapter 2 Vampires with Souls, Chapter 3 Protectors vs Punishers, Chapter 4 A Mixed Breed, Chapter 5 The Prophecies _ Kira ran her hand down the thick paper, fighting the urge to jump right to the fourth chapter _ She let her head fall back onto her pillow. Kira never thought she would be the type of girl that needed an entire chapter of an ancient text devoted to how dangerous she could be. The book had no copyright or publication information. The pages were bumpy from the thick ink that rose off the page, and a thin string was all that held the binding together. Kira almost feared she would wreck it. Had Luke meant for her to find this? She was positive there had no shelf when she had stayed all the night, positive there were no books visible in his home. Training had drained her. So Kira stuffed the under her mattress, where even her sister couldn't reach it, and vowed to stand reading it that week. But, before she could even finish the thought, sleep embraced her. Chapter 11 Everyone's eyes were on Kira as she and her friends walked into the barely recognizable gymnasium. A blush crept up her cheeks and she thanked God for the oversized cat mask complete with ears that accompanied her costume. Emma and Dave were holding hands and giggling, completely unaware of the crowd, while Luke and Miles had already headed for the snack table, leaving Kira alone and uncomfortable by the entrance. She was used to the stares she got because of her voluminous blonde hair, but she had never felt so exposed. Kira wanted to curse Emma for convincing her to wear the skin-tight get-up and for cutting extra cat scratches up the side of her legs. Flashes of her skin were exposed all the way up her thigh and one scratch cut across her entire back. Kira avoided making eye contact with the senior boys who had all but started drooling when she walked in. 20 minutes before, when Luke's trusty pickup van had stopped outside her house, Kira had sprinted from her room, down the stairs and out to keep her mother from commenting on her outfit. She sat safely in the car, Emma kept talking about how she the extra black glittery eyeshadow and mascara Kira had put on, but the boys had been mysteriously silent. Kira was starting to understand why, and she didn't like it. It was one thing to feel sexy, and another to actually have guys openly staring at you. Kira one more look around the room, and all the way in the back of the gym, she spotted him. Tristan sat with Jerome, John and Diana at a table nestlal in the corner of the party, away from the crowd and completely separated from the Hun. All three of the boys wore suits and Diana was dressed in a floor-length black ball gown. They had missed the memo on the costume party and had instead dressed up for a black tie affair. But even though Diana was sitting down and in the wrong theme, Kira begrudgingly thought she looked amazing. Of course, Kira mused, the one guy who I actually want staring at me is completely absorbed in his own world. And Kira left that thought at that, leaving Tristan to go find her friends. Emma had snatched a table right next to the dance, so Kira sat with her to wait for the guys who were gorging on _Aaron T. The just amazing. Emma gushed, while gazing around the room. Kira had to admit that the party committee had done an awesome job. Cobwebs hung all over the ceiling and walls, filled with plastic spiders and white Christmas lights. Carved pumpkins lined the floors and acted as centerpieces. They had even found black lights to make the room and cobwebs glow a creepy purplish color. Very mysterious looking, Kira agreed. She looked over at Emma, who was shifting her weight on the seat while going back and phone speaking and keeping quiet. Spit it out, she told her friend, more curious than anything. I just have to ask about Tristan. What is going on there? I've been keeping my distance and waiting for you to talk, but I just can't wait anymore. And the way he stared at you when we came in. I mean, even I flush akal. Kira snapped her head around to Tristan's table. He was looking like he wanted to you. So, spill. It's complicated because of Luke. Kira silently thanked Emma for the way out, yet totally, because Luke would hate it. Not exactly a lie, but definitely not the real reason for her hesitation. You have to let that go. Luke can handle it, and I know you really like Tristan. Your eyes just lit up like stars when I said his name. Kira blushed, hating her obviousness. The boys came back, saving her from the rest of the conversation. We are definitely the best dressed here, Luke said as he sat down, and Kira couldn't help but agree. Made a great Batman, and Emma looked like the Poison Ivy evil girlfriend. Miles was, well, Miles in his Robin costume, the forever geek, and even Luke had the maniacal charm of the Joker when he wanted to. He had even let the girls cover his face with costume makeup. As Kira watched Luke, he met her eyes, and for the first time Kira thought his gaze held more than just friendship. She quickly denied it, blaming her ridiculous costume, and Luke away. Hey, he grabbed her hand, let's go be evil and mischievous together. She leaned in while they discussed what villainous act to pull, and in the end, Luke went the easy route and pulled Dave's mask off his head and ran away. Kira followed with Miles and Dave hot on their tails. The chase only lasted a few minutes until Dave tackled Luke behind the bleachers. So, Luke tossed the mask to Kira, who quickly found herself cornered by Miles. She threw the mask as far away as she could before Miles jumped on her, hoping the recovery at least would be difficult. Then, out of nowhere, Emma appeared, snatched up the mask and teased Dave until he caught her up in his arms and stole it back. No one can beat Batman and Robin, fools! Dave and Miles yelled triumphantly, and, laughing, the whole group walked back over to their table. Hey, Kira! She jumped at the unfamiliar male voice saying her name and turned around. Kaner Evans, the school quarterback, was talking to her. It was Biza_FFE, Kira thought, put on some leather, and the guy commonly wanted at the most gorgeous PE. Our son to ever attend this school suddenly wants to get to know you. Want to dance? Kira honestly wasn't sure what to do. He was definitely nice to Ed, and he was a completely normal all-American son of Guy _ maybe he would be go OD for her track record, she figured. Emma's eyes practically bulged from her head, and Kira knew she needed to say yes. So, she took his open hand and let him lead her to the dance floor, which resembled more of a mosh pit than anything else. "You look amazing," he whispered in her ear as he put his hands on her back and pressed her body against his. Kira felt the bass rumble through her. She found the rhythm of the music and decided she just needed to enjoy herself, to forget about Luke and Tristan, to forget condits and vampires, and just be a normal hormonal teenage girl dancing with one of the most attractive guys at the school. Carter Iverson one for words, she realized, as they continued to dance in silence. The music blared and the crowd of dancing students moved as one, and soon Kira began to get really overheated in her leather jumpsuit. Even the skin-showing cutouts weren't enough to keep the sweat from gathering, so after a few more songs with her body pressed firmly against his rather tall and broad chest, she and Kaner went to get some punch. Kira around while he waited in line, noticing the jealous stares of her fellow classmates and pointedly avoiding the table all the way in the back. She was ignoring him tonight and not thinking about how his black suit set off the stark blue of his eyes so nicely. Kira quickly drank the few glasses of soda Carter retrieved, and then headed straight to the dance floor again. Carter managed the crowd easily, pushing them closer to the center and away from the tables, so other dancing couples surrounded them. Kira to feel dizzy, like the white lights and glowing cobwebs above her were moving around with them. Kaner's actions seemed to be in slow motion and she felt herself giggling without any reason. When he started kissing her neck, Kira wanted to pull back, but her muscles weren't cooperating and she had to lean on him just to keep from falling over. He looked down at her, smiling, and she laughed loudly, like his kiss was the funniest thing in the world. He spun her around, holding her waist when she wobbled, so that her back pressed against his stomach. Kira leaned her head against his chest, closing her eyes to keep the room from spinning, and almost fell when she felt Kaner step back suddenly. His arm came around her again and she was pressed up against his chest this time, but he wasn't dancing anymore. Kira opened her eyes to ask what was wrong, and instead of Carter's honey irises she saw Tristan's blue ones. She giggled at the unexpected, but welcome, tum of hello, she said and leaned her head back against his chest, this time spotting Carter on the floor, doubled over and clutching his stomach. "Did you hit him? That wasn't very nice." She tried to scold him, but Tristan just rolled his eyes. "Come on. You need some fresh air." "No, I'm fine. Let's just stay like this." Kira leaned her head against his chest again, stopping her SPMS and balancing issues in one deft move. Tristan wrapped his arm around her waist and slowly led her through the mass of people, gripping tighter when he felt her balance wane. After a few minutes, they had slipped free of the crowd and were exiting the humid gym. The blast of cold breeze felt fantastic and Kira let Tristan lead her away from the and past the football field to the big tree overhanging the school's man-made lake. He sat down and leaned against the tree, motioning for her to sit with him, but Kira ignored it and started dancing to the quiet strains of music they could hear coming from the gym. "Kira, sit down." He sounded frustrated. "No. I want to dance." She started jumping up and down to the beat of the music and almost lost her balance, but Tristan stood up and caught her before she crashed. He slipped his jacket off and Kira pushed her arms through the sleeves. Finally, she calmed down and swayed to the music with him. Kira sighed, resigned to the fact that the moment felt completely right. "Ivy hat," he asked. "I'm supposed to be ignoring you, but it's not working." He laughed quietly. "No, that doesn't seem to be working for either of us. Is that why you punched Kaner?" "I just couldn't stand the way he was touching you." Kira smiled to herself. "Jelly belly," she said, wishing she could get her mouth to stop word vomiting. She could feel his chin on the top of her head as he pulled her in closer. "Maybe," he said, but it sounded more like a begrudging yes. "Kira yawned. Time to sit down," he told her while helping her down to the spot next to him on the ground and leaning her back against the tree. Kira watched the moon reflect off the Ivatar. She looked at the sky and saw it still swerving there, and finally had the realization Tristan must have had in the gym. I think my sodas were not just soda, she concluded as the world continued to spin. "I think you're right." He put his arm around her, letting her head fall to his shoulder. They sat silently in the moonlight, just enjoying one another's company. "Are you like 100 years old?" Kira spat out the first question that came to her mind. She had never even thought of it before, too consumed by his eating habits instead. Tristan shrugged. "A little older." Kira sat up, fascinated, and to look him in the eyes. "How old?" she asked, feeling like a little girl. 150, give or take a year. Kira's jaw dropped and her eyelids widened in complete shock. Gross. She clamped her hands over her mouth before she could say anything else. He just laughed it off. "I look pretty good for someone who's more than a century old, right?" He grinned. She blushed thinking off their kiss, and silently agreed. "So, what do we do now?" "I'm 17 and growing, you're and stagnant." Kira finally felt herself coming down from the alcohol Carter had slipped her. The lake still seemed to glow and the stars still danced in the sky, but she was regaining her mental control. "I don't know," he whispered and reached for her hand. Kira intertwined her fingers with his, amazed at his cool touch against her boiling skin. Fire and ice, she thought that really was what they were. Complete fire could melt ice and ice could douse a fire, but was there any way for the two to meet in the middle? But, she thought, Tristan wasn't he just icy? He was passionate and alive like a flame trapper in the Arctic, struggling for the chance to be set free. Kira snuggled in closer as his arm tightened around her shoulders, and she let her breath slow, let herself enjoy the comfort of these moments where nothing but her feelings mattered. When her mind had shut off for a moment, a scream sounded, waking Kira from her reverie. She bolted upright, out of Tristan's arms, and he startled her, jolted from his quiet slumber. They both heard the second scream loud and clear. Kira to the right towards the by the she swore it came from that direction. "Come on, we to help," Kira said and off at a run towards the noise. Tristan swore and ran past her, using his supernatural speed to ahead. Kira made it to the tree line, where the moonlight lost its power and everything was pitch black. She heard whimpering ahead of her, sure that whatever girl had screamed was now in real danger. She crept forward, trying not to trip on the roots and twigs all over the ground. Kira saw the blue glow of a cell phone through the trees and hid behind a bush to evaluate the situation. She had to help. What if that girl had her? But, she wasn't sure what she faced on the other side. She started to stand up. "Stop!" Tristan breathed into her ear. She nearly screamed from fear. "It's Jerome and John. Let me." And, Tristan disappeared around the tree bend towards the noise. "Jerome. John. Control yourselves." She heard the commanding tone in Tristan's voice. But there was no reply. Kira couldn't help it. She was too curious and too worried that Tristan wouldn't save the girl. She crept, on her hands and knees, around the tree and peered towards the light from the cell phone. The LCD cast an eerie blue glow around the forest, illuminating Tristan. She followed his gaze from her and could barely make out the shadow he stared at. Kira inched closer. Then she understood. A girl in a Cinderella costume lay sprawled on the ground, to Kira. Her hair was filled with leaves and dirt, proving a struggle had, and now she wasn't moving. Jerome leaned over her and John, with his back to Kira, held her wrist to his mouth. Kira was paralyzed. They were killing her. But, instead of feeling powerful and angry, Kira felt afraid. The scene had dredged up a memory she had buried long ago, but now it all came rushing back. Baby Kira looked up into the pale freckled face of a woman with straight rarely blonde hair. She tugged on the loose tendrils, thinking it a game, and laughed when she caught stray strands flying in the breeze. We have to hurry, a man said, and Kira was scared by his tone. She over at the tall man with curly red hair, and he strained a smile for her. Don't you worry, baby girl, he said and tapped her nose. She tried to reach his, but her arms were too short. Instead, she used her fire and shot a bolt at his face, laughing as the pretty colors danced across the sky. He looked shocked as the flame landed on his cheek, but it sunk deep into his skin with no harm done. I'm going to get you, he said, sweeping her from the woman's arms and swinging her over his shoulder to pat her burn. Kira laughed and shot a bolt at her mother for another reaction. Her mother caught it in her hand and shot it back. Kira clapped her pudgy baby hands and tried to squish the light, but she missed. She tried again, and shot a long stream at her mother, who now caught it in two hands. She was to send it back, when 7 men burst out of the trees to their left. Lana! The man shouted as the strangers grabbed the woman. She shot the light at them and they fell backwards, but kept coming. The redhead man ran to the side with Kira and lifted her off of his shoulders, hiding her in the twigs and leaves of a bush. Kira, baby! Listen to daddy, he whispered urgently, be quiet and don't shine your light. Whatever, this is very important. Do not let anyone see your power. Even as a baby, Kira knew to listen. He kissed his fingers and touched the kiss to her forehead. Then he took and shot bolts of light from his hands like bullets, slamming them into the vampires nipping at the woman lying on the ground. The vampire stumbled backwards, but more came from behind the man and jumped him, biting into his flesh. He screamed and let the light come out in a long wave. Some vampires were thrown away, others who were feeding were immune to the effects. Eventually, the man fell to his knees, then his stomach, until he too lay still on the ground. Vampires circled both bodies, lying over them, not letting a single drop escape their lips. Kira sat in the bush, still not able to crawl. She didn't release her fire. She to make her father proud. Kira cried silently, until a minute later another crash came, this time from behind her. Arcs of light soared over her head towards the vampires. At first nothing happened, but slowly the vampires moved back against the onslaught of light, not totally immune. Someone grabbed Kira and lifted her from the bush, but she listened to her father and didn't show anyone that she could make flames as well. The vampires moved from her father, but they could not be pushed from her mother. The woman was still surrounded and dying. Let's go. We must hurry. Kira heard in an instant. She had been turned from the scene and a new woman was holding her and telling her everything. You'll be alright. No. Kira shot up from the ground, propelled back from the memory into the present day. Jerome looked up. His pupils had expanded so his eyes were ivory with bloodlust. Kira was alright quick as it had ever come, as though the vision had hilly awakened her powers. Kira shot fire at John's back and right into Jerome's face. Both were instantly flying through the air, slamming into and breaking tree branches with the force of Kira's power. Somehow, she kept the light from Tristan and it curled around him. He was safe. He was not evil and not the force of her rage. When Jerome and John had been flung completely from her sight, Kira winked out the fire, fast and easy, as though tummed off a light bulb. Well, well. Someone has certainly learned a thing or two in the past few weeks. Diana spoke, emerging from the trees. Tristan can't hit me without getting lover boy too. Such a shame. She pouted, still glaring at Kira. Diana was angry. She must have known where Tristan had gone. When he disappeared from the school dance. Kira thought about trying to around Tristan again, but her initial anger was waning, and she wasn't sure if she could control it. "Get out of here, Diana!" Tristan tried to move out of the way, but Diana just followed, as long as she remained 2 feet behind him. "Oh, Tristan," she placed an arm over his shoulder. "I've been letting this go for far too long, letting you suck on your plastic bags, letting you get more human with each passing day. But, it ends here." He made a move to escape her, but she held steady. "Oh, not right now. I'll let you live in this dream world, where you and our mortal enemy happily ever after. But, I'll be back and you'll be my Tristan Agime, and when you are," Diana let him go and forced him to Kira in the eyes, "she'll be the first one you kill." Diana pushed Tristan from behind, and he stumbled into Kira with a look of horror marring his features. Kira caught him, distracted enough to miss her chance to weaken Diana. Instead, Diana disappeared into the probably following John and Jerome, concocting a plan for revenge. "This is all my fault," Tristan swore to himself. Kira hugged him, closing her eyes and comforting him for the moment he needed, before standing up and walking to the girl lying on the ground. She looked so small in her tom and now bloodied Cinderella costume. Kira figured she must be a freshman who was excited by Jerome or John's interest, never once suspecting anything bad would happen. Kira knelt down and lifted the girl's head onto her lap. She had healed herself before, now it was time to try the skill out on someone else. Kira placed her palms over the girl's ears, holding onto her head, and let her power melt into the girl's skin. She could feel it travel through her veins, sealing wounds and healing bruises. After a moment, the girl stirred and moaned in pain, and Kira stopped. She would be safe. The girl would live. Kira kept looking down, imagining the girl as the woman she had seen her in the dream, with pale blonde hair and a dazzling smile. She saw her mother, alone, abandoned by her people, left to die while her husband's body was and her baby taken away. "Is it painful?" she asked Tristan. He understood. "No. Most times, the victim is in a dream state, not aware of their surroundings or of what's happening me. There are sometimes exceptions though, if no care is taken." Kira nodded. "Let me have her. I'll bring her body closer to the school. Here someone will take notice and call an ambulance." Kira felt more than saw the girl be lifted from her arms. She let her body fall back on the dirt, let herself curl into a fetal position and cry. Had her mother been in pain the whole time? Had she felt the life drain from her body? Her father had killed quickly, perhaps because he was a man, and they fear the punishers more. Kira prayed her mother had been sucked into a dream and that she never knew what happened. That in her mind, Kira and her played with fire all the way back to a safe house where the 3 of them could have grown up as a family. She prayed her mother died to dreams of kissing her child goodnight, growing old with her husband and escaping the confines of conduit society. The truth would have been too hard to bear. Tristan returned for Kira. She barely noticed him pick her up and hold her close to his chest, letting her tears soak his fresh white suit shirt. She pulled his jacket tighter around her, relishing the smell of him, the smell of musk, generic soap, and bumped embers that might come from her eventually. Tristan stopped walking and opened his car door. They slid into the back seat with Tristan still cradling her in his arms. Kira fell asleep while he hummed a jazz tune quietly in her ear and placed a loving kiss on her forehead. That night, she dreamed of the first year of her life. Of her parents, of her powers, of how happy she had seemed in that memory. She remembered the games they had played to teach her how to control her flames and how to hide when she needed to. They had her and she had loved them with all her heart, and when they were taken away, Kira had shut down. She had promised her father to never show anyone her powers, so she never used them again, not in front of her adoptive mother and never even alone. Eventually, Kira realized, she had just completely forgotten her powers, but clearly now all of that had Chapter 12. When Kira woke up, her back ached and she was freezing. She pulled Tristan's blazer tighter around herself, fending off the cool November moaning air, before realizing it was probably Tristan himself that was chilling her. She sat up and maneuvered out of his arms, trying not to wake him. Oddly, Kira didn't feel embarrassed at all spending the night with him in his car. She loved having him hold her and comf-01t her. Sure, her parents' age. Would flip when she got home and she would have to figure out what to say to Luke. But for once, Kira wasn't going to worry about that. Kira out the car window at the grounds brushed with dew and the sun that had just started peeking through the sky. The night had awakened something inside of her and she felt different. More in control, like her memories had allowed her to her birthright and to understand it wasn't horrible but beautiful. She could save people. Perhaps, she had been bomb not for chaos but for life. Kira opened her palm and let a little flatney rise to rest on her hand like a small campfire. Her fingers warmed instantly as did her body. Feeling the sun gather on her skin left her completed contented. The swelling under her eyes receded, her scratches from the forest mended themselves, and finally Kira found something better to wake up to than coffee. You're beautiful. You know that. Kira turned to Tristan, happy to wake up to his barely opened eyes and lazy smile. Distracted, she let her light grow, until she saw Tristan wince. Sorry, she said and winkle it out of existence. I don't mind. He sat up. So what now? Kira asked, letting her head fall back on his shoulder. Do you need to go home? Kira shook her head. There were many things they needed to talk. She wanted Tristan to open up to her and tell her about his past. Kira knew that if she went home, he would close himself off again to protect her. Good, then just trust me. He got out of the car and hopped into the driver's seat while Kira sat on the passenger side. Tristan started the engine and slid his hand into hers as he sped out of the school parking lot. Kira couldn't help but wonder if anyone had seen them sleeping in Tristan's car last night. Someone must have. They were in the middle of the parking lot and not everyone had left the school dance. Luke might have, but Kira didn't even to think about that. He would be so angry and hurt. He would never understand why she wanted Tristan. But she and Tristan were the same in many ways, both outcasts who didn't really belong anywhere. Penny for your thoughts? Tristan asked. Kira relaxed and placed her feet on the dashboard, letting her eyes meet his, knowing they like Emma had said earlier. I'm thinking I'm happy just sitting here with you like it's completely normal, she smiled and he grinned back, clutching her fingers a little tighter. I'm also thinking, damn, I wish I'd brought a change of clothes. Tristan snickered and Kira glanced at her leather coverall legs, happy she at least had his coat. Don't worry. We're not going anywhere public. And, where are we going? You don't have to be so mysterious all the time. Maybe I just like keeping you on your toes. Kira rolled her eyes and settled into her seat some more, listening to the music and letting Tristan concentrate on the driving. Eventually they pulled up next to a riverbank. Tristan led Kira along the shore, pulling her until they reached a giant oak tree with branches that reached out over the water. Tristan slid on the branch in front of her and then helped Kira up. Kira let her back rest against the tree tmnk, watching Tristan as he inched further out past the few feet of marsh, until his feet dangled over flowing water. Kira listened to the birds chirp, the water swoosh and the trees rustle, and felt at peace. It's beautiful_al_river are we on? How'd you find it? The Ashley River. I've come here ever since I was a boy. 150 years ago. Kira asked. This was what they had come here for, to talk and to tell their stories. Kira looked at Tristan, watched him peel bark off the branch with his fingers and struggle with what to say. It's okay. She wished he would move closer so she could hold his hands and provide some comfort. Tristan took a deep breath in, let the air ease out and began to tell his story. I was born in 1847, right here in Charleston, to two wealthy plantation owners _ he glanced up at her, trying to gauge Kira's reaction, but she just nodded encouragingly. My house wasn't far from this spot, and I used to play on this tree as a little boy. I was often by myself, left alone to explore and play. You see, my mother was the only one who ever me. We'd go into Charleston and she'd buy me expensive paints. The first time she bought me a canvas, she me up to the steeple I showed you and told me to draw the city. It was life-changing. He paused, and Kira tried to picture him as a little boy, hiding away with paints and drawing pads, exploring the forests alone. It was a sad image of a lonely, and Kira was suddenly more grateful than you were for Chloe and the parents she did have. You have to understand, I never liked slavery, never the family business, and never wanted any part of cotton. That was for my brother. I needed beauty and not savagery. But, when the war came, I did my duty. We went off fighting, my brother fighting for power and I fighting to protect the city I loved, but not the lifestyle. One night, in 1864, the Northern Army surprised my regiment and I got shot twice, once in the thigh, once in the shoulder. I fell instantly and watched as my fellow soldiers retreated to leave me stranded. Other dying men lay moaning all around me and I slowly bled out, awake for what seemed like hours, hearing others fall silent beside me, until a man came. I saw him kneel with the dying, leaning in close. At first, I thought he was a priest saying prayers for the dead, but then he came closer, and I saw the blood all over his face and stalled screaming. For some reason he took pity on me, and saved my life by tumming me. When I woke up, feeling the hunger, I knew hate for the first time. I wished I'd died. Tristan eased his eyes shut, lost in his own thoughts for a moment. Kira knew he was struggling with the memories of the life he had lost. He opened his eyes and stared out into the distance, at the trees on the far side of the riverbank swaying in this wind. Kira had a feeling he was staring through them to a scene she would never herself be able to see. Aldrich, my maker, was not a good man. He kept Dunga ns Philekal with human prisoners, enjoyed torture and murder _ for 30 years, I stayed with him. He forced me to kill, to feed off terrified and crying women, and I thought it was the only way to live. That I was damned to that hell forever. Tristan let out a sad smile and ran his hand through his hair. His shoulders were hunched, but he turned his head to look at Kira. One night, a band of punishers raided his home. We all fled, but I purposely let the convicts separate us. I knew it was my only chance to escape, so I let him think I'd died. I've never seen him since. I don't know whether he lived or died, and I never want to. Kira wanted to cry for him, for the horrible things he had lived through. He moved closer to her, back towards the shore, and Kira grabbed his hand when he was within reach. She pulled him to her, until he had shifted so his back rested against her stomach. She hugged her arms around him. It's all right, now I may be a vampire, but I'm not a bad man. I swear it, he as though he was about to cry. Kira realized his memories still haunted him. I know, she said and nodded, hoping he felt the movement against his head, understanding she was sincere. After I escaped, I kept to myself for a long time. I fed off people I had to, but never enjoyed it and never killed again. I traveled, jumping from one city to the next, trying to see the wonders of the world and meeting different sons of vampires along the way. Some were just as bad as Aldrich and some were just like me. During the First World War, one scavenged on soldiers dying in Europe, but a few years later a discovery changed my life. I stumbled upon a Russian blood bank, found bags full of blood and realized my days of feeding on humans were over _ When did you meet the others? Kira asked, thinking of Diana, Jerome and John. I knew Diana from the start. Tristan angled his head to look at Kira. She hoped she covered her shock well enough. Diana and Tristan had known each other for more than a century. She was with Aldrich for years before he turned me. She took to his teachings far more than I ever did, but she always believed we were meant to be together. She was the one who me escape, and I never heard from her again, until I returned to Charleston 15 years ago, finally ready to come back home. I was tired of drifting, of being alone, and I missed Charleston. It hadn't changed all that much in 100 years, and I was walking through the old town one night when I saw her with Jerome and John. She welcomed me back with open arms, and even though I disapprove of their lifestyles, it felt so nice to a family again. But all that changed when I met Ivhy. Kira couldn't understand how 2 months of barely knowing her had changed Tristan so deeply that he would betray the one person he had known for 100 years. Because surely that's what Diana saw it as, betrayal. The past 2 months had flipped her life upside down, but she never imagined Tristan felt the same. Ivy, when I first saw you, in the classroom, I had no idea what you were. I never dreamed condits could foamy mixel breeds, but Diana knew right away, and she wanted to capture you and to kill you. As soon as she said it, I don't know why, but all I could think about was protecting you well, some protector I turned out to. He shook his head and sat up, jumped from the tree to stand on the shore. He knelt down to gather some flat stones to skip along the water's glassy surface. Kira watched as he beat himself up over the events of the past few weeks. No wonder he always seemed sad. Kira thought he blamed himself for everything, even things completely outside his control. I'm alive, aren't I? Because you discovered your power. Diana almost killed you. But Tristan, she sat up and grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to face her. I might have knew or discovered anything if you hadn't helped me. In the classroom, when you scared me. It awakened my power, made me know I could somehow help myself. And, let us not forget that you saved me from almost drowning. His features softened and he leaned back against the tree branch, covering her hand his own, keeping it securely on his shoulder. You must have questions _fire away. Kira chewed her lip, thinking of what to ask first. Her mind was practically bursting, but she didn't know where to start. Ilhat, do you ask someone who is old enough to be your grandfather but looks young enough to date? Normally, Kira thought, a guy his age would be Mariel ___ Maltede? How many girls had he been with? Kira had only dating for a handful of years, and she had already had at least one boyfriend. Tristan had been doing it for 150 years. He must have had tons of lovers. Kira pulled her hand from his, suddenly very conscious of their age difference. She's never done more than kiss a boy, and she could only imagine what soft of creepy, vampire things Tristan had done. Kira? What are you thinking? He turned around, resting his elbows on the tree branch and looking up at her. Kira twiddled her thumbs, fighting the urge to blush. So, how many girls have you, dated? God, she thought, why am I acting like a 13-year-old? Tristan burst out laughing. Of all the things, that's what you want to know. Well, it's a start. Why? Something to hide? She asked, lifting her eyebrows. Kira was becoming defensive and it brought her out of her dazed schoolgirl mood. No, I don't even know. No one serious, if that's what you're asking. But, I've been around for a while, so I've met some omen along the way and, well he trailed off. Kira hid her face in her hands, suddenly not wanting to know no one serious. That was good enough for her. New topic please, she spoke, still not meeting his eyes. Can I see your fangs? She dropped her hands, feeling like a little kid with a new toy. Tristan rolled his eyes at her, but closed his mouth, and a second later after a expression crossed his features. They were smaller than Kira had remembered with Diana, not nearly as frightening as she had imagined. Pearly white and seemingly delicate, but Kira knew they were lethal, literally. They looked sharp, she thought, and reached her finger out to touch one, but Tristan moved away. Don't. I don't want to hurt you, he said, letting his teeth back into his gums. Kira wasn't sure if he meant hurting her finger, or doing something a little worse, so she left it at that. So, what did Diana meetla about getting her Tristan back? Can she do that? Can she actually change you? Kira leaned back against the tree again. Diana's threat had seemed real and much more a promise than empty words. No, I should probably explain more about Diana though. He sighed, resigned. When Aldrich brought me back, during the change, Diana was the one who cared for me. Afterwards, she taught me how to eat and survive and control the urges. She always believed I loved life with Aldrich and that I would someday love her. But years passed and she could see my discontent. When she helped me escape by leading Aldrich the other away from the Punishers and from me, I think she always expected for me to find her and return to her. When I finally did, I was a different man. She was disgusted that I ate from bags and reused live humans. She still is. I think she believes if I fall off the bandwagon one time, and drink from a human one time, I won't be able to stop. That I'll bayom the monster Aldrich made me into again. He looked up at Kira, his expression hard and ftll of conviction. I never will, Kira. That was never who I are, and I won't go back, no matter what Diana tries to do. 12m confi_razzed though, Kira thought back to the auditorium, when she discovered what Tristan and the others were. He was stronger than all of them. If she had never gotten hit by the started bleeding and distracted him, Tristan would have beaten them all. He had thrown them around like rag dolls and not a single punch had touched him. In the gym, you laughed when they threatened you. They were all afraid to challenge you. Ivhy? Diana's older, shouldn't she more powerful? He the age thing is just a myth. Your human determines power and strength. If you were strong as a human, your strength will be amplified, same with speed. Even abilities like being able to read people's facial expressions can turn into actual mind reading when you're change all into vampire. I think that's why Aldrich turned me. He must have known I'd be as strong as I am. But, HCHRSNT it at all, I could be stronger than a 1,000-year-old vampire, but he's had more time to make friends and garner power, so he's more untouchable. Ivy do you mean? Vampires have their own set of rules. Almost every country has some sort of governing council with heads, son of like senators, in each of the major cities. If I I don't know, Boston, I would need to ask permission first. There are a lot more rules than you'd think. But all the rules I would think of seem to be wrong. Kira said, remembering Tristan in the church and lying in the sum. Ivy do you mean? Well, we're outside during the daylight and you don't seem to be bursting into flame. How did all those rumors get staffed? It was _____ he thought oft right word, beneficial for vampires to stand those rumors that way. Anytime I wore a cross or went surfing, no one would even consider the supernatural, just a precaution. So, I'm the only way you can die. Tristan shrugged, and Kira looked down at the dim burn marks on her hands from the night before. It hadn't even huffed that time. The fire had come completely naturally. Can I become a vampire? No, Tristan said quietly. A conduit can only be killed by a vampire. There rejects the turning. Kira assumed as much, even though Luke had never bothered to tell her that. She was relieved all way, knowing that she could never become a vampire. She would have wanted that, a life of drinking blood, even if it meant a life with Tristan. Can you ever skip out on the whole immortality thing? Tristan shook his head silently. They really were doomed. Kira thought she would grow old and die, probably killing vampires along the way. He would young and strong forever, and there was no way around that. Is all of this it? Kira asked, staring out at the water. The tide had risen and the Va were choppier now, breaking into whiteheads along the surface and swallowing the marshes at the riverbank. I mean, I wouldn't mind the whole cougar aspect, having a boyfriend who's 17 when I'm at the rare old age of 60, but who are we kidding? We have to try, Tristan urged. You can live with never knowing, but I can't spend eternity wondering what could been. And, if we end up falling in truly and deeply, we can deal with it when the time comes. I wouldn't mind having a sugar mama. He winkled at her, and Kira felt her mood lighten a little bit. I'll marry a rich man and you can be the hot pool boy I have a scandalous affair with. Or, I can make a ton of money and pay for all the plastic surgery to keep you looking young. Pumped up lips and little for the wrinkles. I don't like it when faces actually move, you know. Can't I wait? Kira said and pretended to growl like a cougar. He grabbed her around the waist, pulling her from the tree branch and into his arms. They slipped from the shade of the overhanging tree, into the heat of the sun, and it refreshed Kira, giving her energy. What does the sun feel like to you? Kira asked, loving the serenity she always felt when outdoors. Sun of like an electric current cling my skin. It stings, but I don't mind. And what does my sunlight feel like to you? I imagine it's comparable to being Bumel at the stake. Every part of my body boils under the heat. I'm sorry, Kira said, and Tristan brushed the lock of hair that had fallen over her face back behind her ear. I don't blame you. You were only protecting yourself. Besides, as soon as you stop, the pain does in an instant still. Now no feeling sorry for the vampire. Besides, it's my turn to ask you a question. She looked up at him, waiting. Are you really a mix protector and punisher? I thought so, but without tasting more of you, I can't be sure. Gross, Kira thought, tasting me? There will be no blood exchanges today, so I'll just tell you that I am and you'll have to trust me. He smiled, showing her that he had popped his teeth out again, jokingly. You should dye your hair. It's too obvious. If word gets out that you exist, every vampire around the world will be coming after you. Kira rattled a hand through her curls. She had never even thought her hair as dangerous, as giving her away. Her eyes maybe, but how deadly could a strawberry blonde mess really be? And then all hell breaks loose, right? Let's hope we never have to figure that out. Kira silently agreed. All she needed was to let go for a second, lower her guard, and then bam! She remembered her parents, how vampires had jumped them, coming out of the bushes with no warning sign. If a single vampire ever caught her, he could keep her around, drinking her almost dead for immunity, then letting her blood replenish for more supplies. Kira saw Tristan fight Diana, John and Jerome. Without their light, conduits were no match for vampires. It is our only weapon, Kira thought. Conduits need to exist, but Kira could mean their end. You know, you seem different to me, Kira said, liking the cool embrace of his arms around her, comforting despite the cold. Happier, somehow. Like the brooding, sad Tristan has been mostly replaced by the mischievous one. I am. She felt his smile against her forehead. You don't even know you. Had a relief it is to talk to someone about all of this. I've been holding it in for 100 years, and finally, I can openly and honestly talk about how I feel. I can be myself. I understand, Kira said, as she rested her head on his chest, noticing the steady beat of his heart. I can't talk to Luke about how I feel about all of these. He would never understand why I'm even talking to you. He doesn't know what it feels like to trap her. I never asked for these powers. I never asked to a conduit, and the potential end of the world, as Luke described it, if some vampire becomes immune through me. I never wanted any of it. But, he's always lived this life. He always wanted it and he loves his job, I can tell. He told me to keep the healing thing to myself, you know? He thinks the conduit council won't react kindly. It makes me question what they really like, whether I even want to be a part of it. I was wondering about that, Tristan said, running his finger along the spot on Kira's face where Diana had cut her. There was no scratch or scar the next time I saw you. I thought Luke might have done something. I actually don't know very much conduits. I think I'm the only one who can heal things. I don't know how I do it, it's just son of an instinct. They stood in silence, Kira waiting for Tristan's inevitable question. So, what are you going to tell him? Tristan asked, and Kira moved her head to look up at him, reading the vulnerability in his features. She knew what he meant. What would she tell him about them, about this conversation and the intimacy they now shared? Surely, Kira would tell him about finding Jerome and John in the woods, about the memories she recalled and how she could now control herself so much more. But, what about the dance her and Tristan shared by the lake, or the private moments they shared now, talking about the darkest parts of themselves? She couldn't hide from Luke forever, but she wasn't sure if she could come clean and risk losing him. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I don't know how he'll react, and I need him. He's my only to the conduits, the only person I can learn from. It's okay, Tristan said, but Kira saw the quick flash of hurt in his eyes so icy blue she had at first wondered if there even was emotion in there. Now she saw them differently, not icy but deep, like a pond on a calm day when the surface seems hard at first, but something as small as a pebble can drop smoothly in, destroying the semblance of steel. Kira had dropped Eklund's broken the surface of his soul, and she didn't know when she would reach the bottom. Tristan cupped her cheek with his hand, staring into her eyes as well. Kira wondered what he saw there. Were her eyes a raging fire that had suddenly comical to a flickering flame? Her heart seemed to stop as he kept looking, reading her fears and desires, her vulnerability, and the parts of her she tried to keep hidden from everyone else. Then, almost as if in slow motion, he leaned his face down to hers, letting his lips gently grace Kira's, and the moment of calm was gone. Her heart pounded and she stood on her tippy toes, eagerly returning his kisses. Chapter 13. When Kira awoke on Monday morning, she dreaded going to school. She hadn't seen Tristan since he had dropped her off at home on Saturday, and she ignored Luke's calls all weekend, completely unsure of what to tell him. When she finally got out of bed, it took her 10 minutes to brush her teeth and wash her face. She stared at her hollow eyes in the mirror the entire time. She thought of Tristan and felt a blush rise, then quickly thought of Luke and hated herself eventually. Her mother pushed Kira into the and actually drove her to school. Kira's mother left her in the full parking lot, telling her to hurry up because Kira was obviously late. Kira listened and ran to the safety of her class, one she shared with neither of the boys. She kept her eyes glued to the scratched hallway when sprinting from room to room, not daring to even chance making eye contact either boy, and she journeyed at the sound of her narn a few times, only to realize she had been dreaming it. But then, the lunch bell rang. It was time. Unless she decided to eat in the bathroom stall, Kira would have to face Luke and Tristan. She meandered through the halls, waiting for them to thin and for the cafeteria to crowd, hoping her entrance would go unnoticed. Finally, she couldn't stall anymore, and she walked through the double doors into the chaos of lunch hour. Her eyes immediately honed in on the table outside where one lone figure sat, Tristan. He was sprawled across the tabletop, basking in the sun with his hands crossed under his head and his foot tapping to the tune playing only in his mind. Almost immediately, he turned his face to meet Kira's eyes. Her heart stopped and he crinkled the corner of his mouth in a subtle greeting. Instantly, Kira flashed back to the hours they spent lying in each other's arms on Saturday, when all conversation had ended and all there had been were feelings. She had never been kissed so passionately, yet held so gently and treated like a lady he had her and let her set the pace, which ended at kissing. Kira's pulse started racing at the memories, and she mused that her brain had probably confused by the complete momentum shift that could only have been caused by the delightful torment of falling in love. Kira mindlessly bit her lip, hiding the grin that threatened to spread across her face and look away first, right into the eyes of Luke. He was dodging students, weaving his way through the lunch crowd, and staring her down with a look of relief and anger. Without hesitation, he pulled her into a bear hug. "Ivy, what the hell happened to you? I thought you'd died. Ivy, why didn't you call me back?" He set her back down, but kept his hands on her shoulders, ensuring Kira couldn't run away. Nothing. Kira avoided his question when she saw the others making their way over. "We need to talk, not here," she whispered, and then circled his hold to greet Emma, who squealed loudly and hugged Kira in a vice-like grip. "We were so volatile. Oh my god. You don't just run out on a dance like I'm fine," she said when Miles and Dave leaned in to hug her as well. "Geez," she thought, "they really must have been worried. My phone died and I completely didn't realize it. I'm so sorry." Kira shrugged her shoulders, feeling tiltable. "So what happened?" Emma asked when everyone had sat back down at the usual table. "One minute you're dancing with Kaner Evans, Emma, you gled her eyes, and the next you've crap." Kira thought she had forgotten to prepare a cover story for the rest of the gang. Eventually she would have to tell Luke the truth, but what would appease them in the meantime? Go with something gossip-worthy, she thought. Emma will do all the work. "You'll never believe it, but Carter slipped alcohol into my drink. I got totally drunk, and he stalled, freaking out, so he just drove me home. It was insane. I mean, he always seemed like such a nice guy." As Emma's mouth dropped, Kira smiled to herself. Perfect. "Oh my. GCDLV / had a creep. I can't believe this. That must be why he gets so many girls. He totally tried to date rape you." "Okay, maybe too far," Kira thought, and interrupted to rein Emma in. No. I think I just didn't realize. Somebody else could have spiked the punch, I guess. I mean, he drove me home. That was nice. Drove you home after he druggled you." Emma over at Carter, shooting daggers across with her evil eye. Carter actually seemed to sense it, because he looked over and quickly sank down into the sea of Letterman jackets that composed the football team's lunch table. "Yeah, that's right, hide." "Emma," Kira grabbed her friend's arm, forcing her around. "Seriously, it was no big deal. I just went home. I don't even blame him." Woman scorned, Kira thought with a mental shrug. "So, where were you Saturday?" Luke interrupted. What did Emma let Carter go and turned her attention to the bigger Ivy. "Hat do you mean?" Kira stared down at her sandwich, taking it out of the Ziploc bag she had packed it in that mom and pointedly ignoring her friends. "I called you on Saturday, and you never picked up. It rang, by the way, which is unusual for a dead phone, and then I drove by your house and your mom said you hadn't come home yet." "Strange." Kira assumed from his sarcastic tone that Luke was pissed, but the eyebrows and rage-filled stare really cinched it. Kira's mind was racing. Nothing would sound convincing at this point. "I snuck in after they were sleeping and didn't wake up until like 4. Drinking ___ hangover." Kira trying to sound convincing as she let the sentence trail off under the table, she pinched Luke, hoping he would connect it to conduit business, and let it go. He understood, and Kira sensed he knew it was conduit business all along, but wanted to make her squirm. "Damn." Dave chimed in. "Sounds like Carter really got you wasted." "Totally." Kira buried her face in her sandwich egum and let Emma take up the conversation, telling stories about the parts of the party Kira had missed out on. Apparently a bunch of guys from the basketball team pantsed a cheerleader _ Kira was actually disappointed she had missed it. The lunch hour rolled to an end, and Luke Kira's hand as everyone from the cafeteria _ come with me he instincted, leading her against the crowd towards the back door. Kira let him pull her along. Just as they reached she took one last across the empty tables and through the windows at Tristan. He was sitting up now, his white t-shirt a little rumpled from the breeze, and he was resuming her gaze. His eyes were pained, almost like he had been waiting for her eyes all lunch hour and hated to be the afterthought Kira had as Luke took her away. Kira wished she could give him one quick peck on the lips, letting him know he had been in her thoughts all along, but she was shoved through instead. Tristan's eyes stayed with her as she and Luke snuck around the school grounds towards the parking lot. Kira knew she had to fess up, tell Luke everything, and just pray he would be all right with it. She silently eased into Luke's car, letting him drive wherever he wanted to go to talk. Kira thought Luke had maybe expected it. He had to have known she had been keeping things from him, especially things Tristan. It wasn't fair to Luke, she realized, to be lying and going behind his back when he had given up everything to help her inherit her powers. Luke pulled over next to a big empty playground, one slumbering until the town kids all got let out of school. He walked across the open field toward the jungle gym and Kira followed. They sat on old swings that were covered in flakes of rust and squeakle in the breeze. Kira played with the wood chips at her feet, waiting for Luke to start. "I'm not an idiot, you know I know," Kira said softly. "Ever since he saved you on the beach, I knew something was going on. Once you realized who you are, I never thought you'd so stupid." Luke's eyes were boring into her head, daring her to challenge him, to say it was a lie. "I mean, he's a vampire. We were made to kill them." "Not all of us," Kira spoke, and finally Luke up from the ground. You see the good in them." "That's what I've been taught, Kira, but we all know the _ there is no good in them. A vampire can't be saved. That's not time." Kira felt her throat constrict. If Luke were right, there would be no hope for her and Tristan, not ever. She couldn't let herself his words. Luke moved his hand to hold hers on the swing. "It is. Listen to me and trust me, because I for one have never lied. Condits have been alive for thousands of years, and in all that time, not a single vampire has been saved. They are evil, Kira, and any protectors who don't believe it are just fooling themselves. Maybe you can't understand this, but I swear, Tristan is different." Luke started laughing, a dark and hollow sound that turned into a sigh after a few moments. "If he's so angelic, what did he tell you about Bethany? Remember my ex-girlfriend, the one I saw him eating? He swore to me that he hasn't had anything but bagged blood in decades. And, I believe him. He said he was saving her, closing the wound after Jerome had bitten her." Kira shook her head, defiant against the charge. She knew Tristan. "And you him? Just like that?" Luke her hand, swinging away from her in his frustration. "I do." She her ground. If Luke actually got to know Tristan, he would see it too. She knew he would. "Kira, you just don't understand. You don't know enough. I've known people who went away to fight vampires and never came back. I've been part of a search party to rescue a Punisher from being held captive and tortured. The world is a much darker place than you realize. And, I joke and I make fun because you have to be happy or you won't survive, but there's a different side of things you're just naff to see." "I've seen some things," Kira said, lifting her hand away from the chain and letting her palm face the sky. She brought a flame up, small and controlled, and let it dance along her fingers. She threw a tiny ball of light up in the air, catching it with her other hand and absorbing the fire back into her skin. "I had a vision of my parents' death. I relive it, and I think I know more about the world than you realize." Kira stretched her arm out and placed a palm on the fresh cut she had noticed on Luke's bicep. She felt the skin underneath close shut and seamlessly meld together, then took her hand away. He let out a breath she hadn't realized he had been holding. Kira looked at him, at the freckles that spanned from cheek to cheek and the slightly bend of his nose that was beautiful in its strangeness. Kira noticed the luminescent quality of his hair and finally the flaming irises they both shared, but she saw a difference for the first time. He always on with concern and fascination, but now sadness and maybe even defeat rimmed those eyes. "Ivy had happened in your memory?" Luke asked. "It was like you said about the conduit societies. I was a baby and I was playing around with my power, trying to control it and make my parents smile. But then we were journeyed by vampires and they were kicked while I hid under a bush, powerless to stop anything. I'm sorry," Luke said and reached for the hand Kira had let dangle her swing. She shrugged her shoulders, trying to act indifferent, as if the past was just that, in the past. But his hand was warm in hers, keeping her connected to real life and she appreciated it. "How do you remember? Or did you dream it?" "It was Jerome and John actually," Kira said. She continued to hold onto his hand, which now seemed more like a lifeline, and then told him about what had happened. How John and Jerome had almost killed that girl, about Diana's sudden appearance, and a little bit about her afternoon with Tristan and his history. Luke listened out quietly, and Kira as his morose frown was overtaken by worried stress lines. "I don't like it," he finally said, "revenge is the worst kind of evil. But Tristan said it would be fine, that Diana wouldn't be able to do anything to make him go back." Luke nodded absently, but Kira could tell his thoughts were wandering into ominous territory. Hat? "What is it you not telling me?" "Nothing," Luke said, still half aware. "Come on," Kira said and jerked on his hand, almost pulling him from the swing, but at least gaining his attention. "It's just, Tristan might not have a choice. Conduit, it's like a drug to vampires. It makes them go crazy. But he would never bite me," Kira said dubiously, flashing back to the moment in the gym when she had been cut and all of the fighting had ceased. Even Tristan had totally distracted by her blood, and, for a second, had become completely animalistic because of it. Diana smeared some on his lips, he couldn't resist taking a taste. Willingly, no. But, what if it's not in his control? How could they do that? Kira twisted in her swing, coiling the chains and facing Luke. "I have my powers now. They can't surprise me anymore. I'll fight them all. I'm saying is they have a plan, or at least the staff of one. And, it involves you, and Tristan eating you, and some factor we don't see yet. This is serious and we need to prepare somehow." Kira sighed and turned slowly in a circle, winding the chain holding the swing a few more times. She lifted her feet off the ground to let her chair unravel, and spun around, bouncing from side to side, done with these dark conversations that seemed to be creeping one there and fun her into her life. When the world was a blur of green grass, blue sky and sunlight streaking past her eyes, unidentifiable except for the array of colors, she felt much more at peace, like a carefree child. All the worries seemed to slip away when there was nothing to focus on but the wind in her hair and the dizzying of her brain. When the twirling stopped, Kira at Luke, who watched her with a slight smile finally showing on his features. She let her feet fall to the wood chips, a few steps back to gain some leverage and then released, Sermg forward Kira pumped her FET, using her arms for extra power, and propelled herself forward with every lean back and thmst of her legs. Luke began to swing next to her, catching up to her height quickly with his longer legs. Their clothes fluttered in the breeze and Kira's hair flew all around her. Her butt off the seat as she started beating gravity's pull, just for a moment, and Kira felt like a kid again, when she was so young that she thought she could swing high enough to flip over the bar and even gain wings, like a fairy. Finally, the time came when Kira knew she couldn't go any higher. She pulled her forearms and shins in, racing backwards one more time, and then gravity shoved her forward. She leaned back, stretched her feet out and let go of the swing. She felt the chair seat slide out from underneath her as she catapulted forward, flying through the air while her limbs flailed ungracefully_ally, until the ground seemed to rise up and smack against her feet. She rolled forward, falling onto the grass beyond the chipped corral while dead leaves cmnched into her hair. Kira turned her head, watched Luke as he landed beside her with a thud and a somersault, and stalled laughing. "I haven't done that in years," Kira said as she stared at the sky. She watched the clouds blow by, changing from marshmallow white to smoky ebony to brilliant gold as they passed in front of the sun. "Me neither. I think I can wait another 10 years before trying it again though. I can actually feel a massive bee mice growing on my butt right now." Luke groaned and rolled over onto his stomach. "Home," Kira said, wondering if they had talked about Tristan enough, hoping Luke had all the answers he needed for the moment. "Home," Luke said and slowly stood up. He leaned over Kira, grabbing the hand she offered, and pulled her from the ground's clutches. She dusted the din and squashed leaves from her clothes, and followed him to the car. The ride home was safe. They steered clear of vampire-related topics and instead talked about their friends and the holidays. Every time Kira over at Luke, she knew he was only half present. He was her guardian and her friend, and she knew he must be worried about her safety, but Kira couldn't think of anything else she could do. As they turned the corner onto Kira's street, Luke slammed on the brakes and Kira's head almost flew through the front windshield because she had tucked the strap of her behind her back. "Luke! The hell?" She whipped around to berate him, but the hard look in his eyes. She turned slowly in her seat to follow his line of vision as it trailed right to the steps of her front porch where Tristan was casually sitting, leaning against the rail. Kira's pulse started to race at the sight of him. The whites of his eyes reflected the headlights and seemed to glow, while the rest of him, dressed in dark jeans and a black t-shirt, melted into the night. He saw the car and gracefully stood up, like a panther easing out of a nap. Kira smiled at him, feeling giddy, before twisting back around to say her goodbye to Luke. She noticed, was not smiling at all. Instead, he had a vice-like grip on the steering wheel, one that was stopping the circulation to his fingers. His stare was so forceful, Kira feared beams of sunlight would burst from his pupils and melt his front windshield. Luke. He stuck his hands around the wheel while the leather whined in protest. His entire body had tensed up and Kira noticed the bulge of muscles under his long sleeve shift. "Luke." Kira hesitantly extended her hand, barely touching his shoulder before he snapped his attention to her, still stiff, and now with bloodshot eyes from the strain of not blinking. "Look, Kira, I tried to be a good friend and stay calm, I really did, but how can you be so blind?" His hands from the wheel, running his fingers through his hair, practically ripping the strands from his scalp. "He's a killer, okay? A killer. It's what they are. Every time he sees you, part of him wants to kill you. Every time. And, I know he promised it wouldn't happen, but you a fool to him." An idiot. Kira reached for Luke's arms, trying in vain to calm him down. She tried to speak but he cut her off. "No, okay, no. You have to hear this. He lives by drinking human, do you understand? Human and human only. And he's going to live forever while you get old and die, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing in this world that will change that. Even if I wanted to become a vampire, you couldn't. There's no need to risk your life dating him when he'll just kill you eventually." Luke was yelling now, fogging up the windows with his spat out words. "Not now, but what when you're 50 or 60 and he's still 18? Ivy hat then? You're old and wrinkled, he'll kill you while you sleep and you aren't even know until it's late you trust him." He made the word trust sound dirty, and Kira listened equal to his heavy breathing, failing to think of any response. The door behind her swung open and Kira jolted backwards, into the hardness of what she knew could only be Tristan's chest. I do love saying you act like a complete ass, Luke, I've heard enough. I won't just sit here and listen to you talk crap about me. If you want to tell me something, say it to my face or shut up. Kira watched Luke grow angrier by the she was too afraid to move, too fearful any action she made would just add oil to the fire. Kira. She noticed a hand stretch out in front of her, an offer of escape. Stop. Luke grabbed her around the wrist. Yup, Kira thought, I'll just stay right here and not move a muscle. Luke was glaring at a spot just over her shoulder, and based on the tingle she felt in her, Kira guessed Tristan's face was right about it. That they sat like that for what seemed like an hour to Kira, a complete standoff before Luke released her hand. She thought, for a hot moment, that he had relented and was going to end the absurdly macho fight. Until he reached for the handle, jumped out of the driver's seat and sprinted around the front of the car with his hand extended. Kira knew what he was doing before the fire shot from his hank. Luke. She to no avail, and Tristan was hit right in the chest with the whole force of Luke's power. He flew off the ground, sailing through the air to land on his back. Kira knew he could have run away had he wanted to, that the fire was hurting him but was meant to remove him more than to harm him. Still, he let Luke attack, not fighting back, but Kira saw the strain on his features and the taut pull of his lips. She leapt from the car, directly into Luke's flames, and let them absorb into her body. It was the first time Kira had absorbed another conduit's power. She felt alive, from the tips of her to the strands of hair on her head. She let his power funnel into her, felt it spread throughout her limbs and warm her, and Kira almost began to feel like she was pulling the power from Luke rather than he pushing it into her. Luke, stop. Someone might see. You have to stop. He waited a second, full of internal struggles and rage, before ending his onslaught. Listen to me. He opened his mouth in protest, but Kira silenced him by covering his lips with her hand. No, listen. This thing Tristan is something I to do. I know you don't understand it, I know you hate it, but I need you to respect me and my decisions, and leave him be. She released Luke's mouth, but he remained silent. She staggered back, forming a triangle between the three of them, looking from one boy to the other. This goes for a fight, no fighting. None at all, or I will figure out something really terrible to do to both of you, so just stop. I'm not some toy to fight I make my own choices and nothing will change that, so Luke, just go home. Kira read the emotions that fluttered across Luke's face, from anger towards Tristan, to embarrassment over his own actions, to what Kira dared say was apologetic for her sake. Regardless, he silently ived to the other side of his car, hopped in, and drove away without looking back. Well, now that he's gone. Tristan supplied, and Kira faced him, noting the smug smile as he sauntered over and tried to hug her. Hold on. She put her palm against his chest, stopping him. Thank you for not fighting him or running away, but you can't taunt him either, which you know perfectly well was your intention when you opened the car. He had the decency to look guilty. Promise. Promise, he murmured, looking like a little boy whose favorite video game had just been taken away. But, then his features brightened. Care to seal it with a kiss? Kira's insides felt like mush instantly. Her annoyance had melted to make for the butterflies now flying in her stomach. She reached up and kissed him on the lips, ending it soon because she was afraid her parents would evac outside at any moment after all of the commotion. What did you come over for anyway? She questioned, all the sudden curious to know why he had been waiting outside her house. I saw you and Luke leave. I just wanted to see how everything went. Clearly, not all that well. Kira shrugged. Until about 10 minutes ago, things were going great. She presented him with a wry smile, but he suddenly alert and jerked his head towards her house. Your mom is about to come outside. Kira's eyes widened and she pushed him away. Hide. A moment later, the front door creaked open. Kira, honey? Is that you? Yet mom. Kira walked closer to the house and out of the darkness. I'm just making a phone call, be right in. Her mother nodded, concern flashing in her features, before retreating back inside the house. Movie? Tristan asked from somewhere beyond Kira's sight. She nodded. What else could you do if a really hot guy asked to watch a movie with you in your bedroom? Kira knew he would sneak in silently, using all the speed and agility he could, and she prayed there were no stray pairs of underwear lying around when he got there. Chapter 14. The next few weeks passed quickly for Kira. She and Tristan continued to date in secret, meeting at the beach or some private place from his past that he wanted to share her. They picnicked at an old lighthouse that was almost broken down and ready to be demolished, but had an ornamental view of the ocean. He snuck into her room after her parents went to sleep, so they could lie in each other's arms and whisper sweet nothings. Kira was calmed to the way his eyes softened when they met hers, how he would gently brush her cheek with his thumb, holding her face as though it were the most fragile thing in the universe. He shared his travels with her, the years he spent in Europe, his impressions of English accents, how frightened he had been on his first African safan, before he had realized he could do more damage to the animals than they could to him. And, most of all, Tristan shared his art, the most personal part of him. He had sold most of it throughout the years, but he showed Kira some of his favorites, models in Paris, architecture from Russia, the natural beauty of the American West, and, most of all, his family and the friends he had met along the way. Each drawing held a different story, a different facet of Tristan. Kira could tell which aspect of his personality fit with each work of art, and it was more intimate than talking could have ever been. Sometimes, Kira wished she could let Luke in on some of these private moments, when Tristan seemed more human and more vulnerable than ever. Maybe then he would understand, but ever since the night outside her front yard, Luke hadn't even spoken of Tristan, and Kira wouldn't be the one to break the silence. In school, she stayed around Luke, eating with her friends and pairing up with him in class if Luke caught her and Tristan swapping secret glances or talking quietly to one another. Kira would see his features harden and his eyes cloud over with frustration. She needed him as her best friend, so she would quickly pull away, only managing to pain Tristan in the process. Luke continued to train her, teaching her precise control of her powers, like where to aim at a vampire to do the most damage or how to conserve her energy while still firing a deadly shot. She was excited to learn more her heritage and about the Conduit Society. But, all the while, in the back of Kira's thoughts lurked dark imaginations about Diana and the plan she was. One night before falling asleep, Kira felt a lump under her bed. She reached down, confused only to find the old, dusty book she had stolen from Luke but had completely forgotten about. Eager for more information than Luke was sharing, she turned on her reading light and settled into her cushy pillows for an entire week, during her free moments without either boy and in the absence. Schoolwork, Kira read non-stop. The first few chapters discuss the history of the Conduit Society, very similar to what Luke had already told her about the Split and the Punishers, how the difference of opinions began and how a natural genetic mutation formed the two different powers, and the anonymous author discussed different opinions on vampires, whether they had souls or not, and one conduit historian actually believed that those of the ancient SC and Tai, when the Punishers and had been one bred like Kira, had special powers of healing and knew the secret to saving a vampire's soul. Kira believed it, even though the other historians in the book discarded the theory, stating, like Luke, that no vampire in history had been saved. Finally, Kira got to the found chapter, all about her kind, the mix that commonly meant chaos and destruction. She turned the page, excited to get cracking, but the chapter was gone. She to the final chapter, about ancient prophecies, and those pages were missing too. The only pieces of evidence that those chapters existed at all were the fringed edges belonging to pages cut cleanly out with scissors or a knife. Kira was furious. She wanted to know what this group of historians gathered under an anonymous title had to say. She felt, deep in her soul, that something had been about her true calling, not for distinction, but for life. There was something in the prophecies that would help her. She knew it so. Even though it was long past midnight, Kira crept down the stairs, through the dark living room of her house, and out the front. She slid into her car and reversed, not turning her headlights on until she was already down the road and out of the line of sight from her house. She slowed as she neared Luke's home, suddenly regretting her rashness, hoping Luke was awake and that she wouldn't bothering him over nothing. It was just a book and she was sure there were other copies available in mint condition. Kira stopped the car, turned off the lights and sat quietly, totally unsure of what she was doing there, until she noticed a figure walk up Luke's front sidewalk and knock on the door. She was still down the street a little, far away to be nautical, but also too far away to hear anything or really see anything. But when the porch light turned on and the front opened, Kira recognized Tristan's tall, muscular build and imagined the shock on Luke's face. When Tristan sauntered inside, and the door shut behind him, Kira imagined the shock that must have been displayed on her own face at that moment. What worthy of them possibly discussing? Kira thought, instantly intrigued. She realized there was only one topic Luke would tolerate talking to Tristan about, and that was her safety. Something must have happened with Diana, who had been mysteriously absent for weeks, hidden in the shadows planning something to ruin the happiness Kira had managed to build. Kira silently opened her door and traversed the lawn. She crept around the house toward a side window that looked into Luke's living room. She let her sneakers sink in the muddy, unkempt garden while she lifted her head, just high enough that her eyes could see through the blinds. Kira thanked God for the cover of darkness, because she could see into Luke's house perfectly, but it would far more of a challenge for Luke or Tristan to notice her. She spotted Tristan as he leaned against the wall with his hands in the pockets of his typical dark jeans. His eyes were darting around the room nervously. He straightened as Luke walked in, and Kira just had to laugh at Luke's ensemble, which consisted of full-on flannel pajama pants and an old Marvel Comics t-shirt speckle holes from overuse. Luke sat on his couch, not offering Tristan a chair, and Kira felt the tension even through the glass window. They stared at each other, not speaking, until Tristan finally pulled a wooden chair from the dining table and sat opposite Luke. Kira couldn't make out any of their words, but could tell Tristan was frustrated by the way he kept running his hands through his hair and shaking his head. Luke responded in a similar fashion, covering his features as he nodded along to Tristan's words. And then stood up to start pacing around the room as he sipped what Kira imagined was hot coffee. Their movements became more animated as the conversation progressed, and at one point, Luke gripped the back of his couch with both hands and shouted what Kira assumed was a very bad four-letter word in Tristan's direction. He in turn up, pointed at himself, then outside, and then spread his arms wide like some sort of act of sultender. Luke stalled, pointing aggressively at the door, jerking his whole body, and Tristan moved like lightning, running from Luke's house before Kira even had time to go inside and demand to know what was happening. Something she had planned to do when the conversation seemed less heated. Now it was too late, so she settled for talking to Luke alone, and she knocked on the window to get his attention, standing hilly upright so he could see her. Kira watched as he noticed her, cursed, rolled his eyes, and headed for the door. "Kira, you have unbelievable timing," he said when he the door. She shrugged, smiled and said, "It's one of my many charms." His head, led her inside and disappeared into the kitchen to make her some coffee too. When Luke emerged, Kira got straight to the point. So, what just happened? And don't even try to pretend like it was normal to have Tristan come over to hang out. Kira made air quotations around the word, emphasizing how ridiculous of an explanation it would. Relax, I was going to call you tonight as he left, but you were already here. He sat down next to her on the couch and leaned all the way back, releasing a long exhale as his head came to a rest. Look at his eyes and press the skin along his nose, letting another sigh escape. Their plan is so obvious, I can't believe I didn't see it. Kira, he turned at her finally, with a painful expression, it will be all my fault if something to you. I should have seen this. And I yelled at Tristan, but I'm really just angry with myself. Kira reached for his hand, holding his warm fingers, trying to give some comfort. Luke, what is it? What did Tristan say? He tightened his grip. When we were young, conduits are taught our one major weakness. It's something out of our control, but we need to aware of it, always. That's one of the miles you do not forget, and I did. Luke, just tell me. Kira was dying from the not knowing. Finally, the fears she had pushed to the back of her mind during these few weeks of blissful oblivion were coming to the forefront. She didn't want to see Diana again, didn't want to face her, especially if Luke was this scared. A total eclipse. That's the only thing that can take our powers away. Being in the eyes of a full eclipse makes the sun inaccessible and makes us vulnerable to a vampire's attack. We lose all our strength. And Kira, he grabbed her shoulders, driving the eyes home. Today he let his hands drop away as Kira's entire body slumped back against the couch. She felt as though all the life had been knocked out of her. Today? She thought, noting how time seemed to slip through her fingers like sand, when there had been buckets of it just moments ago. What do we do? Her voice came out like a whisper, nearly silent and completely. Luke abruptly up. Let's leave, right now. We'll drive for a few hours. Get out of the eye of the eclipse. Diana, aren't able to touch you? He grabbed her arm, trying to pull her along. No, Kira said, resisting. Luke, think for a moment. I have a family, my parents, Chloe. They would be defenseless. I can't abandon them. He sunk back down. You're right. How much time do we have? Kira asked. It was around 3, maybe 4, in the morning. The sun would rise in a few short hours. 8 or 9 hours. It's supposed to happen around midday, a pure total solar eclipse. They only last for about 15 minutes, and we will only totally lose our powers for 5 minutes, but that's more than enough time for a vampire to kill you. So, how do we fight? Do we even a chance to stand against Diana? Luke shook his head and bit his lip, hiding the sadness in his eyes. I don't know. Tristan didn't know what her plan was. He just sensed her and the others in the area. He knew they were up to something, and then we both realized the eclipse at the Sarn time. It's what they've been waiting for, why they've taken so long to move into action. And Tristan has got to be part of their plan. Kira grabbed her phone and dialed his number straight to voicemail. She tried again, hoping it had been a mistake, but the same thing happened. He's not answering his phone. Do you think they took him? Are they hurting him? Luke just shook his head. Neither one of them had any answers. Kira let her eyes wander around the room, as though the answers were written on the wall somewhere, until her eyes came to rest on her handbag. The book, she realized, the whole reason why she came here. It seemed stupid now, learning about mystical prophecies as if some ancient conduits had all the answers, but Kira realized she didn't know how much time she would have left to ask Luke about it, and, even when the end of her life seemed horribly near, she was curious about those damn missing pages. Luke. He gave her his attention as she pulled the old book from her open purse. It seems silly now, but I stole this and I wanted to give it back, and ask about the missing pages? I actually thought you'd notice it. You stole the book a while ago." He interrupted. She shrugged her eyebrows and half smiled at him, hoping he wasn't actually angry. "They're all missing." "Hey?" Kira questioned, not understanding. The councils from each conduit society met one year and decided that knowledge was no longer useful, so they cut the pages from every copy of that book and bummed them. "I no idea what it said." "No one. This happened a long time ago, 200 years ago maybe." "But why?" The more was that there had been uprisings, across both the Punisher and Protector societies, urging for a reunited race, and the councils overturned it. The prophecies were egging people on and giving them false horse but, all of that is just hearsay now. Instantly, Kira's curiosity was further piqued. What did that say about mixed breeds that would lead to a revolt? It must have been something huge, something that could change everything. Maybe it had been about her ability to heal humans and conduits, surely a power any vampire fighter you'd want to have. But the price, of potentially giving a vampire total immunity, was dangerous. Kira. Luke distracted her from those thoughts. "I need to call the council. They'll know how to. Why don't you go home for a while? Have breakfast with your family." Kira could read it in his eyes. Even though Luke was trying so hard to hide his fear, he worried that this could be her last meal. Kira knew he wanted to run, that he didn't care about her family as much as he cared about her, but when Kira thought of Sweet, she knew there was no other option. Kira hugged Luke, pulled him in tight enough to lose her breath in the parks, and closed her eyes against the emotion threatening to brim over. There was no time left for tears. Kira drove home quickly, ignoring stop signs and racing past the speed limit. Suddenly, being home was the most thing in the world. She knew Luke wouldn't sleep, that he would be working on a solution for all the time they had left. He was going to meet her at her house at 11, an hour before the eclipse. Plenty of time to sit and wait and be terrified together. She hated pulling him into this. It was her fight with Diana. Luke had done nothing to deserve any part of the scorn, but she knew there was no way to stop him. He would let her go down alone. After she parked, Kira tried to slow her racing heart. Her parents couldn't know anything was wrong. She wanted them to live in blissful oblivion. There is time, she kept thinking, time to work out a solution. The answer would come eventually. All she could hope now was that Tristan was working on a plan of his 01VN and was trying to save her as well. Kira feared his plan was to confront Diana before she could confront Kira, but deep down Kira knew it wouldn't work. 3-to-1 odds were too large and Tristan had probably caught already. The sky was lightening when she finally went inside. Kira could only sit in the car and ruminate for so long. Being afraid was no way to spend the last few hours of your life. So she went inside, straight to the kitchen. Cooking always calmed her, and Kira grabbed the pancake mix from the pantry, cracked open some eggs and let the serenity of concentrating on whisking distract her. When her mother ived down the stairs, Kira had a feast ready. Stacks of fluffo pancakes, bowls of fresh whipped cream, candied bames of all kinds and freshly squeezed orange juice decorated the table. She had gone a little overboard, Kira knew it, but she was also extremely satisfied with the way everything turned out. Kira, my goodness! What are you even doing awake? I just couldn't sleep. Kira shrugged, feigning indifference, and pulled out a chair for her mom. Not a second later, Thumps signaled her dad was descending into the kitchen too. Smells amazing, honey. What's the occasion? Her father asked, sitting down next to her mother to dig into the nothing. I just couldn't sleep. Can't a girl do something nice for her family once in a while? Not on a day. This is more of a Sunday morning thing for you, her dad said with a mouth already full of food. Kira assured him she was just in a good mood and happy for the amazing, even if adoptive, parents she had. They talked lightly while they ate, until Kira's mother went to evac up within half an hour. Kira was hugging everyone goodbye, holding on for just a second too long, and assuring her parents that she was just going to quickly clean up and be on her way to school when the door closed. Kira raced back to the kitchen, splashed water on her face, and tried her best not to cry. She leaned over the sink, one hand on either side, looking out at her sunlit backyard, and decided to just let the tears come anyway. Once started, they were impossible to control. She moved slowly, picking up the dirty dishes, putting them in the dishwasher, finishing the orange juice and putting the leftovers in a Ziploc bag. The mundane tasks gave her something to concentrate on, but when they were done, she went up to her room and actually put her focus on what would happen. Diana would come and would attack her. That was certain. That Kira would not be able to stop her for what might as well have been hours was another certainty. The only unknown was Tristan. Had Diana managed to turn him? Would he come looking for her blood or Diana's? Kira sighed and reached for the drawings of his she had kept hidden in her bookshelf. All were of her. She had a collection of these portraits now. Kira looked through them until she reached the one Tristan had crafted when he had been secretly watching her in Battery Park. She took note of the flowing skin and tank top she had worn and searched for them in her closet. She opted for a long shin instead, because even in South Carolina, December brought cool air. On the drive home from Luke's, Kira had treacle to think of a game plan, and like a typical girl, the outfit was a huge part of that. Would she go hardcore like Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 90s cargo pants and a tank top, maybe with a jacket? Would she play it in to make Diana think of her as helpless and maybe gain some small upper hand? Or, would she appeal to Tristan and the human parts of him she knew existed? He was her last hope. Unless Tristan could fight Diana, Kira knew she was doomed. So she decided to wear the sarn thing she had worn when they had shared their first kiss, and Ivy he had first decided to open up to her and to let her inside his secret world. By the time Kira had finished brushing her hair and getting ready, Luke had arrived. He came dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, deciding to downplay the situation just like she had. Kira tried to change her morose, but when she saw his face and the worry lines creasing his forehead, she allowed herself to be sacked. Ivy did the council say? Kira asked as she led Luke through her house and out to the back steps where they had decided to wait for Diana to make her move. They said we should none. Ordered it, in fact, because of how dangerous your capture would be. I told them to go to hell. Kira laughed. Luke always had been a charmer. They that actually, I hung up as they were screaming at me. Assuming we survive, we'll definitely some things to answer to. No point to live if not dangerously, Kira replied as she sat down to wait. When did that become your motto? The time I moved to Charleston, Kira let her tone become darkly humorous. Had she listened to Luke in the beginning, none of these you'd be happening. But, it still all seemed worth the risk. She knew Tristan would trouble from the start, but she guessed with boys, you never really could know how much trouble until it was too late and you level them enough not to care about the consequences. If you could take it all away, and go back to New York, would you? Luke shifted his gaze from one of her eyes to the other, earnestly searching for the truth in her answer. No, I suppose I would have been a target no matter where I was. At least, down here in South Carolina, I had you. You have me. He reached out his hand. Kira squeezed it, letting him know she loved his, but then released him. I wish you would go and save yourself, Luke. We don't know what's going to happen here, and I don't want you to die for me. Please, just go. You know I won't. He settled down, stretching his hands up towards the sky, acting brave and like he had no worries in the world. And, just like that, there were no words left to say. Kira knew Luke loved her, and he knew she could beg him to leave and fall into hysterics, but it would be useless and mentally dramming. So instead, the two of them sat in silence, watching the sun rise higher, waiting for it to disappear. Chapter 15. Before long, Kira heard a rustling in the trees. Luke did too, and he sat up from the instantly alert. They moved as one person to the edge of her porch, 4 hands resting on the white painted banister, searching at the back of her house for any movement. Out of thin air, Diana in the middle of her yard. She was dressed in a sequined, black party dress, one that reminded Kira of the pictures she'd seen of flappers in her history books. Her black hair was flowing freely in the breeze, and her skin seemed like a harsh marble, starkly white in the sunlight. Her sudden appearance stmck Kira more like a magic trick than a natural movement. Kira had little experience with the special powers vampires possessed, and Diana seemed faster than even the wind. She felt Luke's muscles tense her. Diana was far quicker than they could hope to be, but Kira knew a lot of it was for show, to intimidate her and Luke before the real fight even began. "My dearest little Kira, how are you on this fine winter's morning?" The words rolled from Diana's tongue. She knew she had complete control over the situation, and she lazily walked forward, trying to stir fear in Kira's heart. "Diana," Luke said tersely. Kira remained silent, not wanting to give Diana the satisfaction of a response. "Well, what a welcome! I hardly think you're even excited to see me. Ivy Hat gave us away." Luke let the biting remark out evenly. Kira recognized his self-defensive sarcasm, and used it to give her strength. She would resist for as long as possible, just like Luke planned to do. Kira let a small little flame rise on her palm, letting her power heal any weakness Luke and her carried, before firing it at lightning towards Diana's face. It struck before Diana had time to move, and she was thrown backwards as if punched. Kira let herself have a moment of satisfaction. She and Luke knew some cool tricks, too. Diana slowly, her hand to her cheek and malice in her eyes. Kira watched her battle to keep her emotions in, and Diana's weakness became all too clear. She wanted to draw this out and make Kira suffer. So Kira wanted to make it as quick as possible. She fired another shot, a long stream of fire she knew in her was meant to kill. She heard Diana whimper in the onslaught and watched as Diana retreated back into the trees and out of Kira's range. "Bitch!" Diana yelled from the forest. "Do you have a death wish? I'm here to kill you, you know. Do you really want to egg me on? I think I'm the one who almost killed you, Diana. Care to come out for another go?" Kira found her voice and her defiance. She was ready to fight, eager for it almost. "I hope you don't think your boyfriend is going to save you, little Kira." Diana rushed out again, her calm demeanor resumed, but her hair clearly worse for the wear. The imperfection gave Kira a jolt of pleasure. "I can handle myself, thanks. And what about when you can't spit that little flame of yours and chase me away? What then?" Kira shrugged, playing it cool, but was actually wondering the same thing herself. As if on command, Jerome and John walked out of the forest slowly, with Tristan channel between them. Kira gasped. She couldn't help herself. Tristan was shirtless and covered in blood. The streaks stalled at various points of his chest and arms, flowing from wounds that had since closed up bars of his quick healing. Kira knew only another vampire's nails or teeth could have caused that damage. Jerome and John had broken his arms, the same way they had in the auditorium so long ago, and Kira knew they had only been able to catch him with those cheap tricks. They had twisted Tristan's limbs free of their sockets, tying his forearms to the stick they were using to carry him forward. His feet were chained too, but Kira could see that he tried to put some weight on them and not let them drag along the ground. He was trying to be strong, even though his face was the only thing not trapped in constraints. Kira wanted to rush to Tristan when his eyes met hers. They were full of pain, both physical and emotional, and Kira knew he was killing himself over his failure. He had been her last hope, and even now Kira felt the fight leave her a little bit. Diana saw the ivy hat. Did you think he would come in and save the day? I told you already, you stupid girl, he is going to kill you and he is going to like it. Isn't that the promise I made? Diana walked in front of Tristan and held his chin in her hand, forcing him to look at her. With her other hand, she slapped him across the cheek and Kira heard the crunch of his neck breaking and saw his limbs go fully limp. Jerome and John didn't even flinch. Tristan groaned, trying hard to clench his lips together to keep a scream from escaping. Even vampires could feel pain, especially at the brutality of their own kind. A minute later, his neck snapped back in line. Diana leaned back for another slap. No! Kira yelled. Diana stopped her hand, just barely. More than anything, Kira wanted to throw her fire like a huge blanket, smoldering them, but it was too risky with Tristan so weak and close to the others. How sweet! A lover's plea. Diana clapped like a little child playing with her toy. Everything was working out just as she had planned. And, as if on cue, Kira noticed the sky darken just one shade, but it was enough. All six of them looked up, despite the blinding light, to take note of that small sliver of black piercing the sun's surface. There wasn't much time before her powers would be useless. Minutes, maybe. Kira started forward, but Luke grabbed her hand, stopping her. You can't save him now. We have to get out of here, he whispered. Yes, run. It's so much more exciting that way. Diana responded, hearing Luke's request and playing off of his fears. Kira up again, already more of the sun had been coward. She needed to use the time she had. With all the control Kira could gather, she shot flames at Diana, John and Jerome, and amazingly pushed them back. Jerome and John dropped Tristan in their shock, and Kira broke free of Luke to none to Tristan's side. He managed to get onto his knees and she sunk down to her own, all the while keeping her arm outstretched, creating a wall of flames behind the two of them, one that was weakening me with each passing second. I can't hold it for long. Undo the chains, now Tristan. She cradled his face with her free hand, trying to split her attention. It's no use. I can't. I've been trying. You have to run, Kira, now, before Diana has the chance to grab you. Go to your car and just start driving as far away as possible. Kira shook her head. Tristan opened his mouth to argue, but she covered it with a kiss. Kira broke it off when she felt her power weaken further and pulled Tristan into a hug instead, looking past his shoulder at the three cowering vampires waiting for her shield to fall so they could pounce. Kira shifted her gaze to the sky, where the sun was now more than by the black hole of the earth, Ivis being sepal in shadow, and even her light was dimming in the process. Slowly, like a ticking time bomb, the power seeped from her, until finally it winked out and Kira knew the total eclipse had come. I love you, was all Kira had time whisper before hands grabbed her shoulders, throwing her like a rag doll away from Tristan. She landed, hearing the crunch of her ankle as a fierce shot of pain traveled up her spine, and let out a scream. Kira was satisfied that she at least had a moment with Tristan, a small sliver of time to say goodbye and to tell him she loved him. It was the first time those words had passed her lips and Diana could never take that away. Kira, 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 Diana purred and stomped her foot down on Kira's chest, holding her to the ground and crushing her. You should have listened to them both, because now it's late to escape. Luke ran over, jumped at Diana and reached out his hands to strangle her, but Diana backhanded him like a fly and he sailed backwards, smacking into the porch and landing on the ground with a thud. He didn't stir from the spot where he landed, and Kira screamed. She stared transfixed at his immobile body, flailing her limbs like a madwoman to try and escape. Diana's Luke was dying, she was sure of it. She needed to hold him, to help him somehow. Kira used all her strength, but she couldn't budge Diana's. It was useless, and instead of helping Luke, she was just hurting herself. Kira prayed, for what seemed like her first true prayer in ages, that Luke was alive, knocked unconscious, but Ali and Diana seemed to sense Kira's fading hope, because she reached down for a fistful of Kira's hair, and used it to drag her across the yard, dropping her in front of Tristan. Kira realized to make a sound even though it felt as though her head were ripping free of her body. The pain was excruciating, but even still, she wouldn't let Diana win. Jerome and John were holding Tristan again, but this time Jerome's hand was over Tristan's mouth to stop him from uttering a word. Time's up, Kerm, and before Kira could move, Diana's teeth sank into Kira's neck, at the precise where it met her shoulder, and her blood flowed freely into the vampire's system. She heard the gurgling of her own blood, felt the warm liquid seep down her spine where droplets spilled free of Diana's lips. She heard Tristan struggle and scream protests even through Jerome's hand, but Diana yelled, "Stop! Enough!" Jerome's deep voice startled Kira from the pain and the weakness spreading through her body from blood loss. Diana's head jerked up, freeing Kira. "The time for Garns is done. We must use her to fix Tristan." "Fix him?" Kira thought. "He doesn't want to be evil." She wanted to scream at them, but she couldn't find the strength to speak. Her limbs felt like butter, they wouldn't do as she commanded, and Diana held her still. John pulled a glass cup from his pocket and Diana took it. Kira barely registered the cool touch against her skin, but when they pulled the cup away a minute later, it was all to the brim with her blood. Jerome reached his hand down, soaking one of his fingers, and licked it clean with a flash of pleasure. Kira's only hope was that they would lose control, that one of them would end her quickly before they had a chance to change Tristan. If all hope was lost for her, she hoped at least he could be spared, but as quickly as that thought came, it passed because John took the cup, jerked Tristan's head back by his forehead and let her flow freely into his forcibly opened mouth. Kira saw him struggle, shaking his limbs against the chains, trying desperately to escape, and she wondered if he could fight the pull of her blood. Maybe all this time, Diana had been right, Kira yelled be Tristan's undoing. His body started to slump as the glass emptied. Jerome refilled it, passing it back to John, and Tristan didn't move while it was in this time. When the third cup was filled, Tristan strained his head up, arching to get all of Kira's blood, swallowing it willingly, and even in her weakened state, Kira knew a change had Diana let Kira fall to the ground and walked over to Tristan's side. They undid his chains and he quickly, faster than Kira's eye could access it. Her blood had strengthened his body. He stretched out his arms over his head, the muscles of his stomach flexing with the movement, and he cracked all his neck bones before leaning forward to look at Kira. All the fight left Kira's body the moment their eyes met. Tristan was gone. A sob escaped her lips and tears dropped quickly from her eyes the longer she stared into his eyes, which had as hard as stone and colder than ice. She had never seen him look at her that way, like less than food, like vermin, even since the first time they had met. His pupils had dilated, so the blue of his irises were almost paper thin. His fangs were extended, blood dripped from his lips and he licked it away, smiling the entire time. He hugged Diana to his chest, gave her a deep kiss, bit her and then shoved her away, chuckling at her hun expression. Quick as a bullet, he ripped Jerome's t-shirt free of his body and used the rag to wipe the from his chest. Then, as an afterthought, Tristan leaned over Kira, licking her open wound. With her blood fresh on his lips, he said, "Aren't you going to none?" Kira found the strength to back up. Diana she could handle, Jerome and John she could handle, but this Tristan was more than she could stand. How had her blood changed him so much? He was more than animal. He was evil and she was the reason he had changed. Kira stood, swaying on her woozy feet, trying not to feel stabbing pains in her heart as he laughed at her struggles. "Tristan! she asked meekly, reaching her hand out as if she could recover some trace of the man she had lost. Yes, honey. Tristan smiled, blood staining his white teeth and the word honey felt like a slap in Kira's face. The sky confirmed what she felt in her bones, the eclipse was still complete. There would be no refi_age in her power_. With one last look at Tristan, one final gaze to see if he was acting, one final search of the lines of his face for some sign, Kira turned and ran away from the sound of the man she loved laughing in the face of her death. "I give you a head start, little Kira," Tristan called. She winced as he used the name Diana had condescendingly called her, but charged on into the woods beyond her neighbor's backyard, into the darkness where the eclipse had stolen every hint of light that ever previously existed. Kira limped on the ankle she was sure she had broken with each step, a knife seemed to pierce her leg. She was dizzy from the blood loss and her vision was recycling, warping into a tunnel, letting her see only the leaves directly in front of her. Kira triple on tree roots and leaned against giant TMNKs to stabilize herself, and she caught her breath for a moment before pounding forward again. Self-preservation was all Kira thought about. Her instincts had taken over because her thoughts had much to handle, and all she could do was concentrate on running as far as she possibly could. And then she heard the cackling, a shrieking, high-pitched noise, right behind her. A finger, one she knew must have belonged to Diana, poked her back, sending her flying forwards, and Kira kept running. A hand gently caressed her cheek, another slapped at her arm, another pulled on her hair, and Kira knew there was no escape. She felt like millions of ghosts were pawing at her, invisible but tangible, and Kira just stopped, tired of all the games, ready to see if this Tristan was so that he was willing to kill. "I'm done," Kira said to the empty clearing she in the middle of, knowing all four of them were close enough to hear. To keep herself going, she had to think of Tristan as a thing. Not as the human she knew, but as the vampire she needed to kill. No. Diana pouted and emerged from the shadows, a hand clenched down on Kira's shoulder and spun her around. She stared directly in Tristan's face. He let his fangs pop out and leaned down to her to finish the job. Kira pounded her fists against his chest, trying in vain to hun him, but he stilled her easily. Kira to feel his teeth puncture her skin and drain the life from her. She knew that the real Tristan would never go through with it, and hope he was in there somewhere, fighting the bloodlust her cells had created within him. Her body involuntarily jerked when instead of teeth, she felt his cheek gently against hers and heard him breathe in the smell of her hair, the way he loved to do when they were lying side by side in her bed and he thought she was asleep. Kira bit her lip to keep from smiling. If this was a trick, it was the cruelest one of all. Before she even Kira let herself believe Tristan had been fooling them all the entire time. When his lips brushed against the sensitive skin just below her ear and she heard him say, "I love you, too," Kira allowed herself to smile. A moment later, Tristan pushed her to the side to punch the now charging Diana in the face. Kira's legs collapsed and she sunk down to the ground, all her strength gone. For the next minute, all Kira could do was watch as Tristan, rejuvenated and fortified by her blood, threw the vampires around like rag dolls. They all ignored Kira, too caught up in their arlger at Tristan tricking them. Thunder sounded every time one of there flew into a tree TMNK, snapping the bark and causing the forest to wobble on its foundations. Kira up, past the tallest branch, through the swaying leaves, at the sun. An ebony circle covered the sun's surface, but a halo of light stretched past the shadow, fighting to touch back down to earth. After the excruciating wait, the few minutes of total eclipse had passed. Kira felt more than saw the moon move a fraction to the side. No visible change had occurred, but with Kira's connection to the sun, everything had altered within her. With her hands behind her back, Kira brought a flame to life and let her power heal her. She felt the electric current go through her veins, multiplying her blood cells, closing the cuts that streaked across her skin from the branches she had stmck while fleeing, the bones that had shattered in her ankle, and, most of all, Kira felt the two little puncture holes at her neck seal shut without a scar. She jumped up, bringing her hands forward and shooting fire at John, who had failed to taste her. He would not be immune in the slightest, and quickly, Kira let the stream arch up in the sky and circle down, encasing him from above. For John, there was nowhere to run. Kira stopped paying attention to Tristan's fight, letting John have her full attention. She still lacked the control over using her protective powers versus killing powers, and before Kira knew it, John had collapsed into a pile of flaming ash. Kira at the sky. There was no evidence of an anymore. As usual, she had lost track of time when using her powers and she assumed Tristan had kept them away from her. Ivhen she tummed, Tristan and Diana had hold of each other's necks and were squeezing, racing to see who would be decapitated first. Kira stalled forward to help Tristan, but tripped over the body she hadn't noticed at her feet. Jerome lay still with a gaping hole in his chest, next to the crushed remains of his heart. Kira stifled a scream and jumped over him to escape the gruesome sight. Diana squeezed free of Tristan, realizing he would kill her first, and Kira used the open opportunity to shoot a blaze right at Diana's heart, crushing her against a tree, not letting her escape. Kira wasn't sure if enough time had passed. She feared that Diana's immunity hadn't evolved, but Kira's emotions put extra force behind the punch, and Diana had nowhere left to none. The fight was over, but Kira was not playing nice this time. Diana was evil, pure and simple, and evil needed to be destroyed. Kira stepped closer, slowly, until her palm laid flat against Diana's chest, killing her all the faster. "You don't want to kill me, Kira," Diana forced the words out, struggling to make a sound. "Why not? You tried to kill me. You tried to turn my boyfriend against me. You might killed my best friend. Me one good reason." Kira leaned in with each word, staring into Diana's clear blue eyes, letting her meaning sink. "I'm your mother is alive and I know where she is." Kira jumped back, shocked to maintain her control, and in that split second, Diana disappeared. "No!" Kira screamed, trying to run after her. Tristan grabbed her around the waist, picking her up off the ground. It's useless. Don't hurt yourself. Diana has the gift of speed, even I couldn't catch but, my mother. Kira let Tristan hug her close to him, as she to cry at this new lost possibility. Kira had given up on her parents ever since she learned of their existence, but now she felt the loss all over again. She imagined the woman of her vision, with long golden hair that almost sparkled in the sun, and she wanted nothing more than to know her. She still wore the locket and ring around her neck, and even now its weight seemed heavier, seemed to weigh her down, until she broke free of Tristan's hold and reached into her shirt to bring it out. She opened the picture, the sole image of her real family, and felt like she had been punched in the gut. That was the most H01 trick Diana had played, because now Kira you'll never stop wonder. Come on. Tristan lifted Kira up as if she weighed nothing, and started walking through the trees back towards her house. "Tristan?" she asked, trying to push thoughts of her mother to the back of her mind. He looked down at her, waiting for the question she had prompted. Hoping it wouldn't hurt him, she said, "That was all an act, right?" He stopped walking, set her down and her face in both of his hands. Staring into her eyes, he said, "I swear it was. I hated every second of it, I promise. Ever doubt that? For 30 years, I did evil things under Aldrich's control. All I did there was show you a part of my past that I never wanted to let resurface." Tristan wiped her cheeks clean of the salty tears she had let streak down and kissed her softly. "I love you. If I had lost you, I don't know what I would done. I love you, too." Kira reached her arms up around his neck as he picked her up again. They both knew she could walk, but it was much more comfortable this way, she thought as she played with the shorn hairs at the base of his when they emerged from the forest into the freshly cut but now blood-covered grass of her backyard. Kira told Tristan to let her go. She surveyed the darnage, wondering how she would clean it up, when she noticed the body, Luke's body, slumped under the porch where he had fallen from Diana's throw. She screamed and threw her hands up to cover the sound as it escaped her mouth instantly. Kira darted forward, dropping to her knees him, leaning her ear down to listen for a heartbeat. Tristan, on my God, Tristan! Is he dead? I can't hear his heart, I can't hear his health, Kira was yelling, but she couldn't stop. Tristan forcibly moved her to the side, leaning down, listening. I forgot him, Kira said, hardly understanding herself. How had she forgotten about Luke? Her guardian, her best friend, her protector for all of these months? Kira couldn't breathe. She tried to suck in breath, but she was hyperventilating from the shock. His eyes were closed, and the normal healthy tanned glow of his skin had been replaced by the ash grey now covering his body. She cradled his face in her hands. His body felt warm, but cool compared to the normal heat of a conduit's skim. She pushed open one of his eyelids, but his pupil had rolled back into his skull. Tristan! She yelled again, and he sat up, shaking his head. He's not dead yet, but Kira, it'll happen any moment. His heart stopped. I don't know for how long. No. Kira wailed, and then repeated the word over and over again, cradling Luke in her arms. He couldn't be dead. It wasn't possible. Kira thought of how he jumped on Diana, risking everything to UI and help her. She wasn't worth it, she realized, and she hugged him to her, letting tears fall freely. Without even meaning to, her whole body began to glow, not just her hands, and Kira had encased herself and Luke in her power. Tristan was catapulted away, thrown onto the other side of the yard, and Kira kept her eyes closed, chanting, no, 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 as if it were a prayer. Her power seeped out. Kira felt it leave her and melt into Luke's body. She was draining everything she had into his corpse, her very own life force. Kira! She heard Tristan shout, distantly. Kira! You're killing yourself! Stop! She felt hands grab at her, but she resisted, not allowing anything to move her from Luke. She kept her eyes closed, swaying back and forth, using all of the power she possessed. Time passed without her realizing, and before Kira even had the chance to let her power go, she was long gone. Her body fell back, and hit the ground next to Luke's, burned out, limp and lifeless. Kira's eyes fluttered open, stinging from the unfamiliar sensation of light, and everything was blurry. Slowly, the blobs of color sharpened, becoming more defined, and Kira recognized her mother's face. Her lips were moving. Kira tried to force her ears to register the sound. She felt as though she was underwater, that a barrier was catching the sound waves, until it finally broke. Kira, oh Kira, my baby, her mother was crying, holding her by the shoulder and searching for recognition in Kira's eyes. Mom? What happened? Where am I? Kira looked around at the sterile walls, the get-well balloons in the comber, the beeping and blinking machines with tubes sticking into her arms, at her own hospital gown, and stalled to remember. She sat upright. Where's Luke? Is he all right? And Tristan? Calm down, honey. Everything is fine. Her mother hugged Kira close and ran her fingers through Kira's curly and probably naughty hair. Images from that afternoon were flashing through Kira's brain at a mile a minute, Luke running at Diana, Tristan drinking her, Diana laughing in her face, Jerome's body mutilated on the ground, John burning to ash, Tristan whispering he loved her, and Luke's crumpled body on the ground. It was all much. She felt dizzy and leaned back against the pillows while her mother called in the doctors and sent for her father and sister. The rest of her morning and afternoon was spent being pushed from room to room in a wheelchair and performing different tasks or enduring different procedures to make sure her neural functioning was completely normal. Chloe sat on her lap, enjoying the ride and making fun of the silly outfits and robes the doctors were wearing. When the procedures were finished, Kira forced her family to leave her side to go eat dinner, not allowing them to settle for hospital food. She asked them to bring back leftovers and let a nurse take over her care. When the nurse finally rolled Kira back to her room, she had a visitor waiting. Tristan. Kira tried to stand to hug him, but he ran to her side almost she had the chance to move. His arms encircled her, pulling her up to a standing position. His lips kissed her neck sweetly while he smelled her hair. She felt his mouth widen into a smile and she leaned back, staring into his soulful blue eyes that were searching hers for recognition, and Kira grabbed his face, pulling him in for a kiss. The nurse left in a hurry, a little cough and an "excuse me" making Kira laugh against Tristan's lips. She let her fingers sift through his silky black hair and pressed their foreheads together, sitting in the most comfortable silence she had ever experienced. They each other and it was obvious even without words. "Sorry to break up the moment, Luke." Kira had turned around, reaching her arms out for a hug before he had the chance to finish. He hugged her around the waist, lifting her up off the ground before setting her down and helping her back onto her hospital bed. Tristan sat down her, grabbing her left hand, and Luke leaned on the mattress to her right. Kira from one boy to the other, her two loves, one friendly and one romantic, but both meaning the world to her. What happened? Kira looked over at Luke. "The last thing I remember is trying to heal you. I thought you'd died." She had to grin now, happy beyond belief that he was alright. "You healed me, maybe even brought me back to life. But, you almost killed yourself," he looked down at her with concern clouding his features, "and when I sat up, Tristan was leaning me over you, shouting your name, but you weren't responding. We rushed you to the hospital and you've been in a coma ever since." "How long?" Kira looked from one boy to the other. 3 months, Tristan said and squeezed her hand in comfort. Kira let her body slacken in the cushions as she thought about that. It felt like she had been asleep for a while, like taking a really long nap, but 3 months? That was a long time. "Are you guys friends yet?" she questioned, hoping 3 months of worrying about her might have done the trick. Luke and Tristan stared across her, sizing one another up, and finally Tristan replied, turning to Kira. "I think we've come to an understanding." Kira smiled. It was something. She asked about everything she had missed, about Emma and the boys, about school in general, and about her family. Tristan and Luke told her stones, all three of them smiling and laughing together, and Kira felt a warm glow start inside of her, not from power, but from pure happiness. After a while, a doctor told them visiting hours were almost over for non-family members, and Kira knew her own family you'll be back from dinner soon. "Before I go," Luke said, poking his head through the door he had just vacated, "I just wanted to let you know the council semi-forgave us, but they want you to go to visit Sunnyvale with me immediately." "Okay, bye." Luke jumped out. Kira could ever mutter a protest. Coward, she thought he knew she had no interest in the council, but she seeing the conduit society could be interesting. "Ivy hat do you think?" she asked Tristan, liking how he nibbled her palm with his thumb while they held hands. "It's probably inevitable," he sighed. "If she went to the conduit society, you'll not be able to see her or visit her for a while." "Well, there's still plenty of time to figure it out." Kira pulled on his arm so he would lie down next to her. Seeing Luke had been great, but having some intimate moments with Tristan out of Luke's watchful eye was amazing. Tristan let his fingers trail down her arm, dancing light circles on her soft skin, tickling her a little. Kira hugged her arm around his waist, tumming to mold her body to his and resting her head on his chest to listen to the gentle thud of his heart. Her thoughts shifted back to the fight. Kira couldn't forget what Diana had taunted, that her real mother might still be alive. And she didn't want to imagine what sort of hell she had been living in all these years, probably in a dungeon, the feekling toy of an evil vampire. Kira silently vowed to hunt Diana Dowan and get the TMTH_. She would find her mother and she would free her mother, no matter how many vampires she had to kill along the way to do it. As if sensing her dark thoughts, Tristan started to hum a tune quietly in her ear. Kira recognized the jazz song. He had made her listen to it in the car one time, promising Kira would fall in love with the sounds. She didn't love the song, but she loved Tristan and she loved the sound of his voice, a deep tenor that reminded her of rolling waves. Kira let her body relax and drift off into a deep sleep, content to push all thoughts of the future aside for the moment to lie safely in the arms of her lover.